Across the ages, the ruins of forgotten worlds stand in silence. Shattered temples, weathered tablets, and colossal stones that seem to whisper of lives long past. Humanity's oldest civilizations left behind fragments of their brilliance, yet so much remains veiled in shadow. From the golden sands of Egypt, where pyramids rise like eternal sentinels, to the fertile plains of Sumer, where writing and kingship first emerged, each culture offers us both wonder and unease. For within their myths and monuments are questions that defy easy answers. What knowledge was carried by these ancient builders? What forces inspired their sudden rise? And what mysteries led to their decline? Beyond them, across seas and deserts, lie hints of even older hidden civilizations. Cultures erased by time, yet remembered in legend and stone. Their presence lingers not only in artifacts, but in the unsettling gaps of our history, where truth and myth intertwine. Tonight, we journey deep into that realm of the unknown. 4 hours of the most terrifying ancient mysteries from Egypt, Sumer, and the lost civilizations of the deep past await. Let us walk together into the shadows of history, where the answers may be older than time itself. Chapter 1. The Great Pyramid of Giza. Beneath the pale sun of the Giza Plateau, the Great Pyramid rises in silent defiance of time. Its 4 triangular faces, once sheathed in gleaming white Tura limestone, would have reflected the desert light so brightly that they could be seen from miles away. Today, its summit is weathered, its casing stones mostly gone, yet it remains the largest and most mathematically precise monument of the ancient world. Built around 2560 BCE during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, the pyramid stands as the centerpiece of Egypt's 4th dynasty, a monument not merely to one man, but to an age when architecture became a bridge between the mortal and the divine. The sheer scale of the structure is staggering. Over 2 million blocks of stone, some weighing as much as 70 tons, were set with such precision that the joints are barely wider than a human fingernail. Its base is almost perfectly square, with sides that differ by mere centimeters, an astonishing feat considering the tools available to the builders. Even more extraordinary is its alignment. The pyramid's sides are oriented almost exactly to the cardinal directions, true north deviating by less than 1/20th of a degree. No one can say with certainty how this was achieved over 4,500 years ago, though theories range from stellar alignments to the careful observation of shadows during the solstices. Inside, the monument feels more like a machine than a tomb. A narrow descending passage cuts into the bedrock, leading to a subterranean chamber whose purpose remains obscure. Above ground, a series of corridors climb steeply through the heart of the pyramid, opening into spaces that defy expectation. The Grand Gallery is the most dramatic, a soaring, corbelled passageway nearly 30 feet high, its smooth walls narrowing toward the ceiling in a way that suggests both engineering brilliance and ritual intent. Walking through it today feels like stepping into the very throat of the pyramid, a liminal zone between the world of the living and the eternal sky. At its heart lies the King's Chamber, a room constructed entirely of massive granite blocks transported from quarries hundreds of miles to the south in Aswan. Each block weighs dozens of tons, yet they were stacked with such precision that the chamber has remained stable for millennia. Above it are 5 so-called relieving chambers, designed to distribute the weight of the pyramid and prevent collapse. When Colonel Howard Weiss first forced his way into these upper chambers in the 1830s, he discovered hieroglyphic quarry marks that confirmed the pyramid's attribution to Khufu. Though some alternative historians have questioned the circumstances of that discovery, suggesting the possibility of misinterpretation or even fraud. Just below, the Queen's Chamber sits quietly, its corbelled roof giving it an austere beauty. It is here that modern technology has deepened the mystery. In the 1990s, German engineer Rudolf Gantenbrink sent a small robot called Upuaut, the opener of the way, crawling up a narrow shaft leading from the chamber. At the end of its journey, 200 feet into the stone, the robot encountered a small limestone door with copper fittings, a door that had not been seen for over 4,000 years. When later teams drilled a small hole through it, they found yet another stone blocking the passage beyond, suggesting that the shaft may conceal additional secrets still waiting to be revealed. The purpose of these shafts has long puzzled scholars. Some believe they were air vents, others that they were star shafts designed to align with constellations of ritual importance. Orion, associated with Osiris, and Sirius, the herald of the Nile flood. If so, the pyramid may have been designed not just as a tomb, but as a resurrection machine, a cosmic ladder through which the pharaoh's soul could ascend to the heavens. Archaeologists continue to probe the pyramid using non-invasive methods. In 2017, a team employing muon tomography, a technique that uses cosmic rays to detect voids, announced the discovery of a large, previously unknown cavity above the Grand Gallery. Its exact size and purpose are still debated, but it appears to be at least 100 feet long. Is it a hidden chamber, a structural feature, or something more? A relic of a lost ritual architecture whose meaning we have yet to grasp. Even the logistics of construction remain shrouded in mystery. How were these stones moved, placed, and aligned with such accuracy? Mainstream Egyptology proposes massive ramps of earth and mud brick, but the scale of such ramps would have been immense, requiring nearly as much material as the pyramid itself. Other theories suggest spiraling internal ramps or ingenious counterweight systems. Whatever the method, it required a workforce of thousands, organized with military precision and sustained for decades, an achievement that speaks to the administrative genius of the Old Kingdom. Yet for all that has been learned, the pyramid keeps its secrets. No burial of Khufu has ever been found inside it. No mummy, no treasure, no funerary inscriptions. Some scholars argue that the tomb was robbed in antiquity, its contents lost forever. Others wonder if Khufu was never buried there at all, and if the pyramid's function was far more complex than a royal tomb. Inscriptions found in surrounding worker villages confirm the human effort that went into its creation. But the question of its ultimate purpose remains open. Standing at the base of the Great Pyramid today, one cannot help but feel the weight of time pressing in. The desert wind moves softly around the stones, as it has for thousands of years. Each block is a testament to human ambition, but also to something more elusive. A vision of eternity, rendered in limestone and granite. Whether tomb, temple, or cosmic engine, the Great Pyramid remains the most enduring riddle of the ancient world, inviting every generation to climb its steps of mystery and look again toward the stars. And perhaps that is its truest function, to remind us that there are still questions we cannot answer, puzzles we cannot solve, and that the past, like the night sky, will always hold more than we can see. The shafts remain sealed, the hidden voids unexplored, and the story of Khufu's great monument continues, silent and unfinished, as the sands drift quietly against its base. Chapter 2: The Sphinx and its Water Erosion. Debate carved from the bedrock of the Giza Plateau, the Great Sphinx has watched over the Nile Valley for millennia. Its colossal form, part lion and part man, emerges from the desert like a riddle-made stone. Measuring more than 70 meters in length and rising 20 meters into the air, it remains the largest surviving statue from the ancient world. Yet despite its fame, the Sphinx is also one of history's most enduring enigmas. Scholars still argue over its purpose, its age, and even its original appearance. To stand before it is to face a silence older than memory itself. Traditionally, Egyptologists place its construction around 2500 BCE, in the reign of Pharaoh Khafre of the 4th dynasty. This theory rests on circumstantial connections between the statue, Khafre's nearby pyramid, and fragments of statues found in the Valley Temple. The prevailing narrative casts the Sphinx as a royal guardian, its human face thought to be that of Khafre himself. Yet, as with so many aspects of ancient Egypt, the evidence is incomplete. The Sphinx offers no inscriptions proclaiming its builder. It has no foundation texts, no dedicatory carvings, no contemporary mention in Old Kingdom records. It simply exists, as though it had always been there, awaiting interpretation. The mystery deepened in the 1990s, when geologist Robert Schoch of Boston University examined the monument's weathering patterns. The walls of the Sphinx's enclosure, carved directly from the surrounding bedrock, bear deep, rounded fissures, channels that suggest prolonged exposure to heavy rainfall. This type of erosion differs from the horizontal wind scouring that marks much of the plateau. Egypt's arid climate has dominated for over 5,000 years. But if the Sphinx enclosure truly shows water erosion, then its creation might date back to a time when the Nile Valley experienced far heavier rains. Schoch argued that such conditions last prevailed at the end of the last ice age, between 7 and 10,000 years ago. If correct, this would place the carving of the Sphinx millennia before the rise of dynastic Egypt. His conclusions ignited fierce debate. Mainstream Egyptologists countered that the erosion could result from flooding, groundwater, or later human activity. Yet the possibility lingers. Could the Sphinx have been born in a forgotten epoch, its lion's body already ancient when the pyramids rose beside it? Equally provocative is the question of its face. The head of the Sphinx appears disproportionately small compared to its massive body. Some researchers suggest that the statue was recarved in antiquity, its original head perhaps that of a lion, later reshaped into the likeness of a king. If true, the Sphinx may once have embodied a purely leonine guardian of the horizon, symbolizing solar power and cosmic order, before human hands imposed dynastic identity upon it. In this reading, the monument becomes a palimpsest, an ancient form overwritten with the image of Pharaoh Khafra. The Sphinx is not only a riddle of stone, but also of alignment. On the mornings of the equinox, the rising sun appears directly between the statue's massive paws. This celestial symmetry suggests a deliberate connection between the monument and the solar cycle. In ancient Egypt, the equinox marked a time of balance, a cosmic midpoint when day and night stood in equal measure. Was the Sphinx aligned to embody this eternal balance, a cosmic marker set in stone? Or does the alignment hint at a more archaic tradition of sky watching, inherited from cultures even older than dynastic Egypt? In front of the Sphinx, nestled between its paws, rests a granite monument known as the Dream Stela. Erected by Pharaoh Thutmose IV around 1400 BCE, it recounts a vision in which the young prince fell asleep in the shadow of the Sphinx and dreamt that the great guardian promised him kingship if he would clear away the sands that engulfed its body. This inscription not only reveals the monument's religious significance, but also testifies to its antiquity. By the New Kingdom, the Sphinx was already an object of veneration, half buried in the desert. Its origins, a mystery even to the Egyptians themselves. The Dream Stela leaves us with more questions than answers. Why did Thutmose IV feel compelled to record this vision? Was it merely royal propaganda? Or did the Sphinx already carry an aura of supernatural power, its very presence demanding myth? The Egyptians called it Horemakhet, Horus of the Horizon. To them, it was a manifestation of divine kingship, a threshold between earth and sky. Yet the origins of that threshold remain obscured. Beneath its paws, rumors of hidden chambers persist. In the 1970s, seismic surveys conducted by a team including researcher Thomas DeBecke and John Anthony West detected anomalies, rectangular voids beneath the Sphinx's body. Some have speculated that these could be storage chambers, perhaps containing lost records from a vanished civilization. Ancient texts speak of the House of Thoth, or the Hall of Records, a mythical library said to preserve the wisdom of ages before the flood. Mainstream scholars dismiss such ideas as fantasy, but the allure remains. Could the Sphinx guard not only the plateau, but also the memory of worlds erased from history? Over the centuries, the Sphinx has suffered greatly. Its nose and ceremonial beard are missing, perhaps chiseled away deliberately or lost to erosion. Napoleon's troops are often blamed for the damage. Those sketches predating his arrival already show the Sphinx noseless. In every age, the monument has been both revered and neglected, excavated and reburied by the desert winds. Layers of restoration mark its body like scars, reminders of the fragility even of stone when measured against time. Yet despite its wounds, the Sphinx endures as an eternal witness. It gazes eastward, toward the sunrise, as though awaiting a revelation. Each theory about its origin, dynastic guardian, ice age relic, or cosmic marker, tells us as much about ourselves as it does about the monument. The Sphinx mirrors our longing for certainty, our hunger to connect with something vast and enduring, when one stands before it in the quiet of dawn. With the desert wind carrying the scent of sand and stone, the debates of scholars seem to fade. What remains is the presence of the monument itself, monumental, inscrutable, timeless. Its silence is more eloquent than any inscription. The Sphinx asks no questions, yet compels us to ask our own. How old is it truly? What stories does it conceal beneath its paws, in the eroded walls of its enclosure, or in the forgotten layers of the plateau? And perhaps most unsettling of all, what if the Sphinx is not a relic of the known past, but a survivor from a chapter of human history erased from our memory? The desert offers no answer. It simply preserves the question. And as the sun rises once more in perfect alignment between the Sphinx's paws, we are left with the same ancient riddle echoing across the sands of time. Chapter 3. Abydos and the Osirian. The desert at Abydos holds a special silence. For the ancient Egyptians, this was no ordinary city. It was the sacred gateway to the afterlife, a place where the soul began its journey into eternity. Here, at the western edge of the Nile Valley, where the fertile land gives way to barren desert, the earliest kings of Egypt chose to be buried. Long before the pyramids rose at Giza, Abydos was the royal necropolis, the spiritual heart of the kingdom. At the center of this sacred landscape stands a monument unlike any other, the Osirian. Today it lies sunken into the ground, its massive stone pillars rising from a shallow pool fed by the water table, giving the whole place a dreamlike, almost submerged quality. To stand before it is to feel as though you are looking at something far older than the sands around it, a survivor of an age long past. The Osirian is located directly behind the magnificent temple of Seti I, one of the most beautifully preserved temples in Egypt, its walls still alive with intricate reliefs of gods, pharaohs, and ritual scenes. But where Seti's temple is filled with delicately carved limestone and refined artistry, the Osirian is something altogether different. Its blocks are not delicately dressed. They are titanic. Each megalith, some weighing over 100 tons, is carved from rose-red Aswan granite and placed with an accuracy that belies its size. The construction style, massive, unadorned, megalithic, has led many to speculate that the Osirian predates Seti's temple by thousands of years, perhaps originating in Egypt's most remote antiquity. Mainstream Egyptology holds that the Osirian was built during Seti's reign in the 13th century BCE, serving as a symbolic tomb for the god Osiris, a place of ritual resurrection. But even those who accept this dating admit that the style is strange. The temple above is finely decorated, with straight lines and sharp reliefs. While the Osirian has a primeval feel, its massive blocks forming a kind of underground sanctuary that seems to have been designed to last forever. The lack of inscriptions on the granite stones only deepens the mystery. Was it a memorial chamber? A cenotaph for the god of the underworld? Or perhaps a repurposed site built long before Seti's architects incorporated it into their plans? Water plays a haunting role here. The Osirian's floor sits below the level of the Nile's floodplain, meaning that for much of the year the chamber is partially submerged. Some researchers believe this was intentional, turning the temple into a symbolic representation of the primeval waters of creation, the Nun, from which all life emerged. In ancient myth, Osiris himself was associated with the cycles of death and rebirth, and so a water-filled temple dedicated to him would have been a powerful image of regeneration. Even today, the mirrored surface of the water reflects the columns above, as though the temple exists both in the world of the living and its inverted reflection, the unseen world below. The Osirian has also become a focus of fascination for those who believe Egypt's civilization may have inherited much older knowledge. The sheer scale of the blocks and the precision of their placement have drawn comparisons to other megalithic sites around the world, from the Cyclopean walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru to the great trilithons of Baalbek. Could this be a fragment of a forgotten chapter in Egypt's prehistory, a surviving element of a culture that predated even the first dynasty? The question lingers because there are few firm clues to settle the matter either way. Adding to the site's mystery are the so-called helicopter glyphs, carved high on a lintel in Seti's temple above. These unusual shapes appear to resemble a modern helicopter, a tank, and even a submarine, sparking decades of speculation and countless sensational claims. Egyptologists, however, explain them as a palimpsest, a case of hieroglyphs from different reigns being superimposed, creating accidental shapes that look familiar to modern eyes. Whether coincidence or not, these carvings have fueled alternative theories suggesting that the Egyptians may have possessed knowledge of technologies we have yet to fully understand. Excavations of the Osirian have revealed that it was not simply a symbolic monument but a functioning ritual space. A central hall is surrounded by a rectangular trench, crossed by stone bridges leading to an island-like platform. This arrangement suggests processional rites, perhaps reenactments of the death and resurrection of Osiris, in which priests may have taken part in sacred dramas designed to ensure the fertility of the land and the rebirth of the king's soul. The temple's alignment is also curious. Some researchers argue that the Osirion may have astronomical significance, possibly aligning with certain stars or solstice points during the period of its construction. Such alignments would have underscored the cosmic dimension of the rituals performed here, linking the cycles of the stars to the eternal cycles of life, death, and rebirth. Despite these theories, much of the Osirion remains unstudied in detail. Its lower levels are difficult to access due to constant flooding, and for much of the 20th century, the site was barely visited at all. Only in recent decades has it begun to receive greater attention, as archaeologists and engineers seek to understand both its construction and its purpose. Every new survey brings with it a hint that there is more to discover, perhaps deeper chambers beneath the visible floor, or inscriptions that could shed light on who built this enigmatic sanctuary and why. Standing at the edge of the Osirion today, as the water laps quietly against the granite, one feels both the weight of history and its elusiveness. The walls are silent, refusing to tell us who first placed these stones, or what ceremonies were enacted here under the desert stars. The great blocks endure, but the voices that once filled this chamber are gone, leaving only the faint echo of a civilization's most sacred myths. Perhaps this is the Osirion's final gift, not answers, but questions. Its flooded halls remind us that the past is always partly hidden, submerged beneath layers of time and meaning. And somewhere within this ancient silence, we sense that Abydos still guards its secrets, waiting for the moment we are ready to hear them. Chapter 4. The Tomb of Osiris on the Giza. Plateau beneath the golden sands of Giza, where the pyramids rise like eternal mountains of stone, there lies a darker and lesser-known mystery. Not in the open sunlight where tourists tread, but deep. Within the living rock of the plateau, a hidden complex was uncovered in the late 1990s. To descend into it is to leave behind the desert's glare and enter an underworld carved in silence, a place some have called the Tomb of Osiris. The story begins with shafts, narrow openings cut into the limestone bedrock west of the Great Pyramid, near the causeway of Khafra. For years, these holes in the ground were thought to be minor quarries or unfinished tombs. Yet when modern excavations began, archaeologists found that they led downward into waterlogged passages and chambers, far deeper than expected. What appeared at first as a shallow cavity revealed itself as a descending system of levels, each more enigmatic than the last. The third and deepest chamber, lying nearly 30 meters beneath the surface, contains a central stone sarcophagus surrounded by 4 smaller niches. The chamber is massive, cut directly from the rock with geometric precision. It was partly flooded when rediscovered, its black waters reflecting torchlight like a mirror into another world. Standing within it, one feels the unmistakable symbolism of descent, a journey into the hidden womb of the earth. It was this symbolism that inspired its name, the Tomb of Osiris. In Egyptian mythology, Osiris was the god of the underworld, the judge of souls, and the archetypal king who had died, been dismembered, and resurrected. To associate this chamber with him is not merely romantic imagination. Ancient texts speak of Osiris's burial place as lying beneath the earth at Giza, linked to water and darkness. Greek writers, including Plutarch, repeated similar traditions centuries later. The discovery of a sarcophagus resting in a cavern filled with water seemed to echo these myths too closely to ignore. But the purpose of this subterranean monument remains a matter of debate. Was it truly a tomb, meant for a god, or a symbolic king? No inscriptions adorn the walls, no funerary texts guide the soul, and no human remains were recovered. Unlike the pyramid tombs, which proclaim their ownership through carved names and texts, this chamber is silent. Some scholars suggest it may have been a cenotaph, a symbolic tomb not intended for an actual burial. Others propose it was used for rituals of initiation, where priests reenacted the death and resurrection of Osiris, descending into the earth to be symbolically reborn. The architecture itself invites such speculation. The vertical shafts resemble symbolic pathways into the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. The water-filled chamber recalls the primeval waters of Nun, from which all creation arose. And at the very center lies the sarcophagus, empty, waiting, perhaps intended not for a body but for an idea. Equally intriguing is the placement of this complex. The shafts and chambers lie along the western causeway of Khafra's pyramid, perfectly integrated into the larger sacred landscape of Giza. The plateau's design has long suggested more than mere practicality. The pyramids, the sphinx, the temples, and the causeways align with both celestial patterns and earthly geography in ways that continue to puzzle researchers. The Osiris shaft, as it is sometimes called, seems to form part of this larger plan, a subterranean mirror to the grand monuments above. Some have suggested that this hidden complex may be a survival of an older stratum of ritual architecture, a blueprint later echoed in the pyramids themselves. If so, it may preserve traditions older than the 4th dynasty, preserved in stone and hidden beneath the plateau. Others resist such conclusions, preferring to see the complex as a later construction, perhaps a symbolic shrine built during the Sate period of Egypt's late dynasty. But the lack of inscriptions or datable material leaves the question unresolved. The discovery itself was dramatic. In 1999, under the direction of Dr. Zahi Hawass, teams cleared and excavated the shafts. Divers entered the dark, waist-deep waters of the lower chamber to explore its secrets. There, the granite sarcophagus was documented, lying empty but intact. Although widely publicized at the time, details about the site remain fragmentary. It is rarely accessible to the public, and many of its mysteries remain sealed by both water and official restriction. Speculation has flourished in this silence. Could the so-called Tomb of Osiris conceal deeper chambers still unexcavated, perhaps connected to the fabled Hall of Records spoken of in esoteric traditions? Might it hold clues to a forgotten chapter of Egyptian prehistory, when gods and kings walked together in mythic time? Or is it simply one more puzzle among the countless enigmatic structures the Egyptians left behind, meant to echo myth rather than embody history? The very name Tomb of Osiris embodies this tension. Mainstream Egyptology treats it as a convenient label, not evidence of divine burial. But to those attuned to the symbolic language of Egypt, the resonance is too precise to dismiss. Water, darkness, descent, the central sarcophagus, these are the very elements of the Osirian myth. Whether by coincidence or intention, the chamber seems to embody the journey of death, dismemberment, and resurrection. To stand in that chamber, were one allowed, would be to feel the weight of thousands of years pressing down from the rock above. The air would be damp, heavy with the scent of limestone and water. The silence, broken only by the drip of unseen leaks, would remind one of a tomb untouched for ages. In such a place, myth and archaeology blur. One is not simply visiting a ruin, but stepping into a ritual space, crafted to embody the thresholds between worlds. And so, the Tomb of Osiris remains what the Sphinx, the pyramids, and so many monuments of Egypt remain. An open question carved into stone. A site where history and myth embrace, where evidence exists but refuses to speak plainly. Was it a burial, a shrine, an initiation chamber, or perhaps something even older, now reinterpreted through the lens of later belief? The waters still guard their secret. The sarcophagus lies empty. The shafts plunge into the earth, as though pointing toward truths buried deeper still. And above, the pyramids rise against the desert sky, guardians of mysteries both seen and unseen. Perhaps the ancients intended it so that their greatest monuments would not merely preserve the past, but provoke questions in the hearts of those who came after, questions that echo still, unanswered, in the silence beneath the plateau. Chapter 5: Saqqara and the Serapeum of the Apis bulls. Beneath the sands of Saqqara lies a place that feels more like a tomb for giants than a burial site for animals. This is the Serapeum, a vast, dimly lit corridor cut into the limestone plateau, stretching into the darkness like a subterranean road. Here, massive stone sarcophagi rest in silent rows, their black granite surfaces polished to a mirror sheen. Each one weighs more than 70 tons, and yet they have been set into small side chambers with a precision that defies comprehension. To stand in this place is to feel small, as if you have entered the mechanical heart of some forgotten age. The Serapeum was discovered in 1850 by the French Egyptologist Auguste Mariette, who had been following rumors of sacred burials hidden beneath the necropolis of Saqqara. After weeks of digging, Mariette's team broke through into the underground passage, finding it blocked by great stones. Behind them lay the prize, chamber after chamber containing gigantic sarcophagi. Inside a few of these, they found the remains of mummified bulls, confirming that this was the final resting place of the Apis, the sacred bull of Ptah, worshipped in Memphis as a living god. For the Egyptians, the Apis bull was no ordinary animal. Its markings were considered divine signs, and when one was identified, it was treated as an earthly manifestation of the god. Upon its death, elaborate funerary rites were performed, and the animal was embalmed and placed in one of these sarcophagi. A new bull was then sought out to embody the spirit of Ptah once again, continuing the cycle of divine kingship and fertility. But the sheer scale of the sarcophagi raises unsettling questions. Each box, carved from a single block of granite or diorite, is perfectly squared and polished to such a degree that even today they would require advanced tools to replicate with similar precision. The lids themselves weigh nearly 30 tons, and yet they are fitted so exactly that a blade of grass could hardly slip between them. How were these boxes quarried, transported dozens of kilometers from Aswan, hauled into the tight confines of the underground tunnels, and positioned with such accuracy, all in an age when copper chisels and wooden sledges were supposedly the main tools available? The logistics baffle modern engineers. The corridors of the Serapeum are narrow, with ceilings barely higher than the sarcophagi themselves. This means the boxes must have been placed there before the final roofing blocks were installed, requiring a highly organized operation that involved lowering multi-ton stones into confined spaces. Some researchers have suggested the use of ramps, sledges, and massive teams of laborers lubricating the path with mud and water. Others wonder if there might have been techniques now lost to history, methods of lifting and maneuvering heavy stone that we no longer understand. The mystery deepens when one looks at the finish of the stone. Inside the sarcophagi, the surfaces are smooth, almost reflective, as though machined. There are no visible tool marks that would indicate a slow chiseling process. This has led to speculation that more sophisticated, stone-cutting technologies may have been employed. Technologies that leave few traces behind, but produce a precision more often associated with later eras. Then there is the question of purpose. If the Serapeum was merely a burial gallery, why such monumental effort? Could the size of the boxes have been symbolic, a way of elevating the Apis bull to a cosmic scale? Or were these boxes meant to hold something more than mummified remains? Perhaps ritually charged objects, relics, or items of power meant to remain hidden for eternity. In several cases, the sarcophagi were found empty, as though their contents had been removed long ago. Was this the work of ancient tomb robbers, or does it hint at a different kind of ritual? One where emptiness itself was the point. The Serapeum also carries a strange acoustical quality. The massive granite boxes resonate when struck, producing deep, bell-like tones that seem to vibrate through the chamber walls. Some visitors have noted the unusual stillness of the air, as though sound behaves differently here. Could the Serapeum have been designed not just as a burial place, but as a resonant chamber for ceremonies, perhaps involving sound, chanting, or music meant to connect with the divine? Modern researchers have returned to the site with laser scanning and ground-penetrating radar, hoping to learn more about how it was built. The precision of the cutting and the sheer volume of stone involved continues to astonish, and no clear evidence of ramps or lifting systems has been found within the gallery itself. The Serapeum is therefore not just an archaeological site, but an engineering puzzle, one that forces us to reconsider the organizational and technical abilities of the Egyptians in the New Kingdom. Outside the underground galleries, Saqqara itself adds context to the mystery. It is one of the oldest and most important necropolises in Egypt, home to the step pyramid of Djoser, the earliest large stone structure ever built. The presence of the Serapeum here suggests that this was a place where death and divinity were deeply entwined, where kings and sacred animals were linked through cycles of renewal. The Apis cult endured for centuries, its rituals continuing well into the Greco-Roman era, indicating just how central this belief was to the spiritual life of Egypt. As you walk through the dark halls of the Serapeum today, guided only by dim electric lights, It feels as though the space itself remembers every ritual performed there. The air is heavy, still, almost expectant. The sarcophagi sit like sleeping giants, their black surfaces swallowing what little light filters in. They do not explain themselves. They only wait, as they have for millennia, guardians of a secret that may never be spoken. And perhaps that is the enduring power of the Serapeum, that it forces us to confront the vast gulf between what we think we know of the past and what the past actually was. These great stone boxes are not just archaeological curiosities. They are questions hewn from granite, posed across time. And as we step back into the daylight of Saqqara, we are left wondering whether we have touched the edge of an ancient mystery or merely opened the first door. Chapter 6. The Bent Pyramid of Sneferu rising from the desert sands of Dashur. The Bent Pyramid stands unlike any other monument of ancient Egypt. Its limestone flanks, pale and gleaming in the sunlight, rise steeply at first before shifting abruptly midway, bending inward at a gentler angle. From a distance, it appears as though two pyramids had been fused together, a monument caught between transformation and completion. It is one of the best preserved pyramids in Egypt, yet also one of the most enigmatic. Its strange form has puzzled historians, architects, and seekers of hidden meaning for centuries. The pyramid was built during the reign of Pharaoh Sneferu, founder of the 4th dynasty, who ruled around 2600 BCE. Sneferu was a visionary king, remembered not only for his long reign, but also for his ambitious building projects. He commissioned at least 3 pyramids, pushing the boundaries of architecture and shaping the legacy that would culminate in the Great Pyramid of Giza under his son, Khufu. Yet among his creations, the Bent Pyramid remains the most unusual. Its slope begins at a steep 54 degrees, then shifts suddenly near its upper half to about 43 degrees. No other pyramid in Egypt bears such a design. The most straightforward explanation is structural failure. The steep lower angle may have proved unstable, threatening collapse as the builders worked their way upward. Adjusting the slope would have relieved pressure and stabilized the monument. Supporting this theory, evidence of cracks and stress fractures has been found within the pyramid's masonry, as if the structure strained under its own weight. Yet, if it was simply a mistake corrected midway, why did the builders continue to refine and complete the pyramid with such care? Its casing stones, many still intact, show that it was finished to a high standard, suggesting that its bent form was not seen as a flaw, but embraced as final design. Some Egyptologists propose that the bend was intentional from the beginning, part of a symbolic program. To the ancient Egyptians, geometry was not merely functional but sacred. Angles and alignments carried meaning, mirroring celestial cycles and divine order. Could the bent pyramid's form represent a duality, perhaps between the earthly and the celestial, the mortal and the divine? The steep lower slope rises boldly from the desert floor, while the gentler upper section reaches calmly toward the sky, as though uniting two realms within a single monument. Inside, the pyramid deepens the mystery. Unlike most pyramids of its time, it has 2 separate entrances, one on the north face and another on the west. Each leads to a distinct passage system and chamber. The northern entrance descends into a chamber with a corbelled roof, while the western entrance connects to a higher chamber, linked by a narrow ascending passage. These 2 chambers, one low and one elevated, seem to echo the dual nature suggested by the exterior shape. Was this a practical redundancy, a safeguard in case one passage failed? Or was it a symbolic expression, reflecting the dual path of the soul in the afterlife, one descending, one ascending? Sneferu's architectural ambitions provide further context. The bent pyramid is not his only creation at Dashur. Nearby stands the Red Pyramid, the first true smooth-sided pyramid completed at a consistent angle. Together, they appear as stages in an evolution of form, from experimental structures such as the collapsed pyramid at Meidum, to the bent experiment at Dashur, to the perfected geometry of the Red Pyramid. This narrative portrays Sneferu as the pioneer whose failures and refinements paved the way for the grandeur of Giza. Yet this view risks oversimplifying, for the bent pyramid is not a collapsed ruin. It is a completed, carefully finished monument. It stands today in remarkable preservation, as if its builders achieved exactly what they intended. Adding weight to this perspective is the presence of a smaller satellite pyramid constructed beside the main structure. It too shows signs of careful design, suggesting that the bent pyramid was integrated into a ritual complex rather than abandoned as a failed experiment. The entire site reflects deliberation, as though Sneferu's architects worked within a larger symbolic vision that we no longer fully understand. Some scholars suggest a cosmological reading. The angle shift could symbolize the horizon itself, the point where earth and sky meet. Others point to the association of pyramids with the primeval mound, the first hill to rise from the waters of chaos in Egyptian creation myth. Perhaps the bent form represented the mound's emergence in stages, from steep birth to gentle rise. Still others note that the pyramid lies in alignment with Heliopolis, the sacred city of the sun god Ra, hinting that its geometry may have been tied to solar rituals. The bent pyramid's preservation also offers a glimpse into its original splendor. Unlike most other pyramids, which lost their polished outer casing over centuries of quarrying, this monument retains much of its limestone skin. In the time of Sneferu, its surface would have shone brilliantly, reflecting the desert's sun like a beacon. For those approaching across the Nile floodplain, the bent form gleaming in white stone must have appeared otherworldly, a shape both familiar and strange, as though it marked the threshold between human and divine realms. What, then, was the true intention of its design? Was it an engineering correction, sanctified after necessity? Or was it a deliberate geometry, encoding a symbolic message that has slipped from memory? The truth remains elusive. Perhaps it was both. A structural adjustment that took on spiritual meaning. For in Egypt, there was rarely a division between practical necessity and sacred symbolism. To change the form was not to diminish it, but to redefine its meaning within the eternal language of stone. As with so many monuments of the ancient world, the bent pyramid resists definitive answers. It stands today as a monument of transition, poised between experiment and perfection, between earthly limits and cosmic aspiration. Its silent chambers and sloping walls invite us to ponder not only the ingenuity of its builders, but also the unseen layers of meaning that guided their work. And so, the bent pyramid endures, its strange silhouette rising against the desert horizon. To some, it is a mistake preserved in stone. To others, it is a message from the ancient world, encrypted in geometry and light. Whatever its purpose, it remains one of the most haunting and enigmatic achievements of Egypt's Old Kingdom, a riddle of stone that bends but does not break beneath the weight of time. Chapter 7. The Black Pyramid of Amenemhat. Third, rising from the desert at Dashur, the Black Pyramid is not the soaring geometric form we imagine when we think of Egyptian pyramids. Today, it appears as a low, collapsed mound, a ruin that barely hints at its once proud shape. And yet, this was the grand project of Amenemhat III, one of the most powerful kings of Egypt's Middle Kingdom. Around 1850 BCE, he commissioned this pyramid as his primary tomb, seeking to link himself with the great builders of the Old Kingdom. At the time of its construction, its gleaming white limestone casing would have been visible from miles away, reflecting the sunlight like a beacon of royal power. Unlike the earlier pyramids built of solid stone, the Black Pyramid was constructed with a core of mud brick. This was not a careless decision, but an economic and practical one. Stone was costly and time-consuming to quarry, while mud brick could be produced in great quantity from the floodplains of the Nile. The builders encased this brick core in fine limestone, carefully polished and set. Within, they created one of the most intricate substructures of any pyramid ever built, a maze of twisting corridors, hidden passageways, and false doors designed to confuse and frustrate tomb robbers. Excavations in the 19th and 20th centuries revealed just how elaborate this internal plan was. The descending passage leads into a complex network that seems to double back on itself, as though inviting intruders to lose their way. At the center lay the burial chamber, constructed from massive limestone blocks, and originally sealed with portcullis stones. Wooden coffins, fragments of canopic jars, and traces of funerary equipment were found inside, though much of the tomb had already been plundered in antiquity. Even so, the discoveries painted a vivid picture of royal funerary practice in the Middle Kingdom, showing a court determined to protect the king's remains from desecration. But this pyramid is remembered less for its treasures and more for its failure. Over time, the weight of the structure pressed down on the soft, waterlogged clay beneath it. The mud brick core began to buckle, walls cracked, and the burial chambers shifted dangerously. The builders may have attempted repairs, but the process was relentless. The ground simply could not bear the load. Eventually, the pyramid began to collapse inward, By the end of Amenemhat III's reign, the structure had become unsafe. His body was removed and reburied in a second pyramid at Hawara, leaving the Black Pyramid as a warning of what could go wrong when ambition outpaced nature. The collapse is not merely an engineering story, it is a reminder that even in an age of great builders, mistakes could be made. The ancient Egyptians were master architects, but they learned from failure. Later, pyramids avoided sites with soft subsoil and refined their construction techniques to distribute weight more effectively. The Black Pyramid thus stands at a turning point in Egyptian architecture, a monument where the old dream of pyramid building met the realities of geology and materials. And yet, there is still a kind of beauty in its ruin. To walk among the remains today is to see not just collapse, but endurance. The mud brick walls still hold their shape in places, the outline of corridors still traceable under the sand. The limestone casing blocks where they survive gleam faintly in the desert light. The site carries a quiet dignity, a reminder that even a failed pyramid is still a royal tomb, still a place where prayers for eternity were once spoken. Archaeologists continue to study the site, mapping its substructure and learning from its construction techniques. In doing so, they glimpse not only the intentions of Amenemhat III, but also the skill and determination of the laborers who brought his vision to life. Their work, though undone by time and shifting earth, still speaks across the centuries. The Black Pyramid invites reflection on ambition, impermanence, and memory. It stands as a ruin, but also as a lesson, that even kings and architects who dream of eternity must contend with the slow, patient forces of the earth beneath their feet. And as the desert wind passes over its sunken summit, one is left wondering whether the failure of the pyramid was seen by the ancients not merely as a disaster, but as an omen, a sign that some monuments were not meant to last forever. Chapter 8. The labyrinth of Hawara, at the edge of the Fayum oasis, where the desert meets the fertile lands drawn from the Nile by ancient canals. There once stood a monument so vast and so intricate that the Greeks believed it rivaled the pyramids themselves. This was the labyrinth of Hawara, a complex of chambers, corridors, and courtyards described by Herodotus, Diodorus Siculus, and Strabo with awe and wonder. They spoke of thousands of rooms, of halls dedicated to the gnomes of Egypt, and of secrets carved into stone, more enduring than any written record. Today, little of that grandeur is visible. The site at Hawara, south of modern-day Fayum, appears barren, a scatter of ruins half sunken into the mud. Yet beneath this silence, beneath centuries of silt and rising groundwater, lies the mortuary temple of Amenemhat III of the 12th dynasty. Built in the 19th century BCE, it once formed the entrance to the king's pyramid tomb. But this was no ordinary mortuary temple. Ancient travelers described it as a labyrinth beyond comprehension, a monument that preserved within its chambers the story of Egypt itself. Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BCE, claimed he had seen the labyrinth with his own eyes. He described it as having 12 great courts, surrounded by 3,000 rooms arranged in 2 levels, half above ground, half below. Within its walls, he wrote, lay the histories of Egypt's kings carved on stone and sacred halls devoted to the gods. He confessed that words could not convey its scale. I found it greater than words could tell. Strabo, a few centuries later, echoed this testimony, calling it a great palace composed of many palaces. What became of this wonder? By the time of the Roman Empire, much of the labyrinth had already fallen into ruin. Stone was stripped away, walls collapsed, and the Nile's waters slowly claimed the site. Today, the pyramid of Amenemhat III still rises nearby, its mud brick core eroded but visible. The mortuary temple, however, lies buried, its foundations swallowed by groundwater, yet traces of the labyrinth persist. 19th century explorers, such as Flinders Petrie, excavated parts of the site, uncovering colossal blocks of limestone and fragments of columns, evidence of a structure of immense scale. Petrie's surveys revealed a ground plan that matched in spirit, if not in every detail, the ancient accounts. The purpose of the labyrinth remains debated. Some see it as a grand administrative centre, housing records of Egypt's provinces, each gnome represented by its own chamber. Others view it as primarily religious, a temple complex dedicated to Osiris and the solar gods, embodying in stone the Egyptian vision of the cosmos. For Amenemhat III, one of the most powerful rulers of the Middle Kingdom, it was likely both a monument to his reign, a statement of order, and a gateway to eternity. Yet the myth has outgrown the history. Over centuries, the labyrinth became linked with esoteric traditions, mystical writings, and the tantalizing idea of a hidden archive. Could Hawara conceal the fabled Hall of Records, the legendary library said to preserve the lost wisdom of Atlantis or of Egypt's own forgotten prehistory? This idea, born in the writings of later mystics and popularized in the 20th century, has inspired seekers to imagine that beneath the mud and water lie chambers still untouched, filled with scrolls, stelae, and forgotten knowledge. Modern archaeology offers a more cautious picture. Ground-penetrating surveys and magnetometer scans conducted in recent decades suggest the presence of massive substructures still buried beneath the site. Rectilinear anomalies extend for hundreds of meters, consistent with foundations and walls. These findings confirm what Herodotus hinted, that the labyrinth was real, monumental, and still largely hidden. Yet whether it contains archives of dynasties or simply empty halls of stone remains unknown. Excavation is hindered by flooding, as the water table has risen dramatically since the building of nearby irrigation canals. The labyrinth sleeps beneath a lake of mud, inaccessible to direct exploration, and so the mystery endures. Was the labyrinth of Hawara truly as vast as Herodotus described? Did it once contain the annals of Egypt's kings, carved in stone for eternity? If so, those records would now be buried, waiting in silence beneath the silt. For alternative historians, this silence is charged with meaning. They imagine the labyrinth as a vault, perhaps preserving evidence of forgotten ages, of dynasties erased, or of contact with civilizations lost to memory. The symmetry of its design, its integration with the pyramid, and its sheer scale suggest an ambition that transcended ordinary mortuary architecture. What is certain is that Amenemhat III sought to create more than a tomb. His reign marked the height of the Middle Kingdom, a period of prosperity and centralized power. The labyrinth embodied that order, a stone mirror of Egypt itself, where each chamber represented a province, unified under one king. It was a political statement as much as a spiritual one. The whole land of Egypt, gathered in one monument, eternalized in architecture. To imagine walking its halls is to envision corridors stretching endlessly, walls carved with hieroglyphs, courtyards lit by shafts of sunlight, and the echo of footsteps upon stone. Perhaps the lower chambers, described as subterranean, were filled with the silence of darkness, flooded even then with groundwater, echoing the mythic underworld. The very act of descent may have symbolized a journey into the Duat, the realm of the dead. The labyrinth, in this reading, was both palace and underworld, archive and temple, a microcosm of Egypt's cosmos. Even in ruin, its memory shaped the imagination of later ages. The Greeks compared it to their own myths, linking it with the labyrinth of Crete, where the Minotaur once roamed. The Romans saw in it a marvel of engineering. Mystics saw in it the echo of a lost world, a repository of wisdom hidden from the uninitiated. Each interpretation added another layer to the legend, until the labyrinth of Hawara became less a monument than a mirror of human longing for knowledge preserved against time. Today, the site rests quietly, visited by few, overshadowed by the grandeur of the pyramids. Yet beneath its flooded soil lies a mystery perhaps as great as Giza. Archaeologists continue to debate, seekers continue to dream, and the labyrinth itself remains silent. Its stones do not speak, its chambers remain unseen. And so we are left with questions. Was the labyrinth truly the grand archive of Egypt's dynasties, as Herodotus believed? Does it still conceal, beneath layers of water and sand, the annals of ages waiting to be rediscovered? Or was it simply a temple, grand in scope, but emptied by time? The desert does not answer, it only preserves, holding its secrets in silence. And beneath the Fayum's shifting waters, the labyrinth of Hawara waits, half memory, half myth. Its passages close to us, but open in imagination, where the echoes of forgotten voices still linger in the dark. Chapter 9. Nabta Playa and the Stone Circle. Far out in the emptiness of the Nubian desert, where the wind sweeps over dry sand and the horizon feels endless, there is a place that tells a story far older than the pyramids. This place is Nabta Playa, a desolate, shallow basin that today appears lifeless. Yet 7,000 years ago, it was not a desert at all. Seasonal rains would have filled a large lake here, attracting herds of animals, and with them, the pastoral people who made this region their home. What remains now is a haunting silence broken only by the occasional whisper of wind, and within that silence, stones arranged with a purpose that still challenges our understanding of prehistory. The centerpiece of Nabta Playa is its enigmatic stone, circle, a modest arrangement of megaliths that predate Stonehenge by more than a millennium. These stones, some standing upright, others fallen and half buried, are aligned in a way that seems to mark the summer solstice. When researchers first studied the alignments in the 1990s, they found that the sightlines pointed toward the rising of key stars, including Sirius, a star that would later play an important role in the calendar and mythology of ancient Egypt. The precision of these alignments is what arrests the imagination. To track the solstice requires not just casual observation, but generations of careful watching, recording, and remembering. These were people living in an age before writing, before kingdoms, before monumental temples, and yet they were already reaching for the sky, binding their lives to the rhythm of the heavens. The stone circle may have served as a calendar, helping its builders know when the rains would come, when to move their herds, when the lake would return to life. Excavations at Nabta Playa have revealed more than just stones. Archaeologists uncovered a series of tumuli, low mounds that concealed the remains of cattle, carefully buried as though in sacrifice. These were not random deposits of bones. Many were complete skeletons, some placed in specially prepared chambers lined with stone slabs. This level of ritual effort suggests that cattle were not just a food source, but a central part of their spiritual world, perhaps linked to fertility, wealth, and survival. Later, Egyptian religion would hold the bull as a symbol of strength and regeneration, from the Apis cult at Memphis to the sacred imagery of Hathor. At Nabta Playa, we may be seeing the distant origins of that reverence. What makes the site all the more remarkable is its antiquity. Radiocarbon dating places the earliest activity here as far back as 7500 BCE, with the most intense construction occurring around 5000 BCE, a time when the Sahara was gradually shifting from a lush savanna into the desert we know today. These pastoral communities adapted by moving in sync with the climate, eventually leaving the region as it became uninhabitable. Some scholars have suggested that these people may have carried their knowledge of astronomy, ritual, and animal husbandry northward into the Nile Valley, laying the intellectual and cultural groundwork for the rise of dynastic Egypt. The megaliths themselves are not as massive as those at Stonehenge or Karnak, but their arrangement carries a quiet sophistication. The circle's diameter is small, only about 4 meters across, yet it encodes celestial events with startling accuracy. Nearby, rows of larger standing stones point toward the north-south axis, as though mapping the cardinal directions. To stand within the circle at dawn, imagining the rising sun striking the horizon at the solstice, is to feel that deep connection to the sky that must have guided its makers. And yet, questions linger. How did these early people, without cities or writing, maintain the astronomical records necessary to construct such alignments? Did they pass knowledge orally, through generations of careful observation? Or was there some other method of preserving memory we no longer understand? Why choose this remote player, and why mark it with stone? Was it simply a practical calendar? Or was it also a sacred space? A place where the earth met the sky, where rituals tied the fate of the people to the movement of the cosmos? There is also a strange resonance in the site's location. Nabta Playa lies along what would have been an important migration route, a meeting point for different groups moving through the region. Perhaps it was a gathering place, a ceremonial center where scattered clans came together to celebrate seasonal rites. The cattle burials hint at communal feasts or offerings, sacrifices meant to secure the favor of unseen powers that governed rain and life. As the Sahara dried, the people who built Nabta Playa moved on. The lake vanished, the grasslands receded, and the desert swallowed the circle of stones. Thousands of years later, when it was rediscovered, it was as if a window into the deep past had opened, showing us a culture that watched the stars and aligned its life to their turning long before pharaohs ruled the Nile. Today, Nabta Playa is one of the most important prehistoric sites in Africa, yet it remains largely unknown to the wider world. It is a place that challenges the neat division between prehistoric and historic, showing that complex thought and ritual practice were already present long before writing. Carved its first signs into clay. As we leave the site, the wind rises and the desert reclaims its silence. The stones remain, half buried, waiting for the next dawn when the sun will once again strike its appointed place on the horizon. The people who built it are gone, but their memory lingers in this careful alignment of rock and sky. It is as if they left behind not just a calendar, but a message, one we are still learning to read, one that whispers that the story of Egypt began here under the open sky, with a people who watched the heavens and dreamed of eternity. Chapter 10. Göbekli Tepe and the pillars of T-shaped stone high on a limestone ridge in southeastern Turkey, overlooking the dry plains of Upper Mesopotamia, lies a place that has shaken the foundations of archaeology. Known today as Göbekli Tepe, the Potbelly Hill, it is a mound that for thousands of years concealed one of humanity's oldest and most enigmatic creations. Beneath layers of earth and deliberate backfill, archaeologists uncovered stone circles older than the pyramids of Giza, older than Stonehenge, older even than the dawn of writing itself. The stones rise from the bedrock like frozen sentinels, their T-shaped forms silent, yet charged with meaning. Dating back more than 11,000 years, at the edge of the last ice age, Göbekli Tepe predates agriculture, cities, and organized states. And yet, here were found monumental pillars weighing as much as 16 tons, carved with intricate reliefs of animals, insects, and abstract symbols. The discovery defied the orthodox view of prehistory. For decades, scholars taught that only after the rise of farming and sedentary life could humanity achieve the surpluses and organization needed to construct such architecture. But Göbekli Tepe reverses that sequence. Here, it seems, monumental ritual came first, and agriculture followed. The site was first identified in the 1960s by survey teams, but its true significance remained hidden until 1994, when the German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began excavations. What he revealed was astonishing. A series of circular and oval enclosures, each framed by massive limestone pillars arranged in concentric rings. At the center of many stood two larger T-shaped monoliths, facing one another, their broad shafts carved with the faint outlines of arms, hands, and belts. They were not mere stones, but stylized anthropomorphic beings, colossal representations of something more than human, perhaps ancestral figures or deities whose presence dominated the gathering spaces. The surfaces of the pillars are adorned with a menagerie of life. Snakes slither across the stone, wild boars, foxes, and leopards prowl in eternal stillness. Vultures spread their wings, recalling perhaps a death cult or sky burial practice. Scorpions crawl beside gazelles, while abstract symbols, H-shaped signs, crescents, and enigmatic lines recur across the site. This imagery is not random. It speaks to a symbolic world, a mythology older than agriculture itself. Yet the meaning of these carvings remains locked in silence, their language lost in the shadows of prehistory. Göbekli Tepe was not a village. No domestic houses or hearths have been uncovered within its sacred precincts. Instead, evidence suggests it was a gathering place, perhaps a pilgrimage center, where scattered bands of hunter-gatherers converged seasonally. The remains of wild game, gazelles, aurochs, and birds, indicate large feasts took place here. Broken bones and charred seeds tell of gatherings that may have stretched into communal rituals, and in the center, the towering pillars presided like eternal witnesses, their gaze fixed not on the mundane, but on the realm of the sacred. Schmidt and others proposed that Göbekli Tepe was the world's first temple, a sanctuary built not for the living, but for the gods, or for the ancestors who merged with the divine. If so, then the act of building such sanctuaries may have catalyzed a revolution in human life. To feed the laborers, to sustain the gatherings, people may have begun cultivating grains nearby. Indeed, the surrounding hills are the very cradle of wild einkorn wheat. The temple may not have been the result of agriculture, but its cause. And then, perhaps most puzzling of all, is the deliberate burial of the site. Layer after layer of backfill, stone, rubble, and refuse was poured into the enclosures, entombing the pillars until the hill swelled above them. Why would a society expend such effort to hide its greatest achievement? Was it an act of reverence, sealing the sanctuaries once their purpose had been fulfilled? Was it an attempt to protect them from enemies or from memory itself? Or was it part of a cyclical ritual where structures were raised, used, and then ritually entombed as offerings to the earth? The mystery deepens with the alignment of the pillars. Some researchers suggest astronomical significance, that certain enclosures were oriented to the rising of stars, perhaps even the constellation Orion, long associated with resurrection and the underworld in later Egyptian cosmology. Others point to connections with Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, whose appearance marked seasonal changes. If Göbekli Tepe was an observatory of the heavens, then its builders sought to bind the rhythms of sky and earth in stone. Comparisons with later mythologies only add to the enigma. The twin central pillars recall divine pairs, sky gods and earth gods, creator twins, or primal ancestors found in myths across the world. The vultures carved on the stones mirror scenes in Neolithic Anatolian art, where vultures carry the souls of the dead. The serpents slithering in relief may echo later traditions of chthonic guardians, or the primal chaos subdued by divine order. In Göbekli Tepe we glimpse not the beginning of religion, but a fully formed symbolic universe already in motion. Mainstream archaeology sees the site as part of the pre-pottery Neolithic period, roughly 9600 to 8000 BCE. Yet alternative voices wonder whether its origins may stretch deeper still. Some suggest that the precision of its carvings and the weight of its stones hint at knowledge older than the official record allows. Others ask whether Göbekli Tepe was truly the first of its kind, or simply the best preserved survivor of a forgotten era of megalithic sanctuaries. The deliberate burial, after all, preserved it while other sites may have crumbled, erased by time, conquest, or the sea. To walk among the excavated circles today is to sense both presence and absence. Only a fraction of the mound has been uncovered. An estimated 90% still lies untouched beneath the earth. What more remains buried? More pillars? More symbols? Perhaps chambers filled with offerings, or with records long lost. Every stone unearthed only deepens the question. For the people who built Göbekli Tepe, the effort must have been immense. Without beasts of burden, without wheels, without metal tools, they quarried and moved stones of staggering size. Rope, wooden sledges, and sheer human will brought the monoliths from the quarry to the hilltop. Their work required cooperation across clans, coordination across seasons, and a vision shared by many. What drove them? Faith, fear, the desire to bind heaven and earth together in enduring stone. When the site was finally abandoned, its memory was sealed beneath the rising mound. For thousands of years, the ridge was just another hill among many, grazed by sheep and overlooked by villagers. Only in the late 20th century did the soil give way and the pillars emerge again into the light of the sun. In that moment, history itself shifted. Göbekli Tepe challenges us to rethink the story of civilization. It suggests that humans were building sanctuaries before they built farms, that symbolic worlds shaped material ones, and that the urge to connect with the transcendent preceded the drive for cities. It forces us to ask, what else lies hidden beneath the soil, waiting to rewrite our past? And yet, as we stand before the T-shaped giants, we sense that the mystery is meant to endure. Their faces are blank, their silence deliberate. They speak through absence, through enigma. Were they gods? Ancestors? Symbols of forces beyond name? Perhaps all, perhaps none. The people who raised them left no written record, only stone and silence. The hill still guards its secrets. Only a fraction has been revealed, and the rest remains entombed, as if awaiting the right moment to awaken. Perhaps there are more circles beneath, perhaps hidden carvings, perhaps messages we are not yet ready to read. For now, the pillars stand in the Anatolian wind, older than agriculture, older than cities, timeless, enduring, and unresolved. Chapter 11. Çatalhöyük and the world's first city murals. On the windswept plains of central Anatolia lies a mound that, at first glance, appears unremarkable. Just another rise in the earth, shaped by centuries of weather. But beneath this mound is Çatalhöyük, one of the most extraordinary windows into the deep past ever discovered, dating back to around 7500 BCE. It is not just a settlement, but a place that scholars often call the world's first city, a proto-urban experiment that challenges what we think. We know about the origins of complex society. Excavations at Çatalhöyük reveal a strikingly different kind of urban life. Instead of streets, the site is made up of tightly packed mud brick houses that share walls, forming a honeycomb-like structure. There were no alleys or open squares. Instead, people entered their homes through holes in the roof, climbing down wooden ladders into rooms lit by the flicker of hearth fires. This rooftop world would have been alive with movement. Children playing, adults carrying out daily tasks, neighbors visiting across the rooftops. From above, the settlement would have appeared as an unbroken quilt of mud brick structures, as though the entire community was a single living organism. What makes Çatalhöyük so remarkable is not just its architecture, but its art. Painted on the plastered walls of these homes are murals unlike anything else from this early period of human history. They depict dynamic hunting scenes with leaping deer, aurochs, and wild boar, images that suggest a society still deeply connected to the chase, even as it embraced farming and animal domestication. Other murals show vultures towering over headless human figures, perhaps representing ritual exposure of the dead or symbolic visions of death and transformation. One of the most debated images from Çatalhöyük is often called the world's first map. It shows a series of rectangles, possibly representing houses, with a twin-peaked mountain rising in the background. Some scholars believe this is an early representation of the settlement itself, with the nearby volcano Hasan Dağ shown erupting, a memory of a dramatic natural event recorded on the walls of a house. If this interpretation is correct, it would mean that the people of Çatalhöyük were not only creating art for ritual or decoration, but also documenting their environment and experiences, linking space, memory, and myth. Life in Çatalhöyük seems to have been surprisingly egalitarian for such a large community. Archaeologists have found no evidence of palaces, temples, or grand tombs. The houses are roughly equal in size, with no clear indication of social stratification. The art, ritual objects, and burials are distributed evenly across the settlement, suggesting a society where spiritual and political power may have been shared rather than centralized. This is in sharp contrast to later cities, where rulers built monumental architecture to display their authority. The burials are one of the most intimate and haunting aspects of the site. The dead were interred beneath the floors of the houses, sometimes in groups, sometimes individually. Over time, layers of burials accumulated, and new houses were built directly above them. This meant that daily life took place literally over the resting places of ancestors, perhaps a way of keeping the dead close, folding them into the fabric of the living community. Some skeletons show signs of being painted with red ochre before burial, linking them to symbolic acts of renewal and fertility. Excavation director Ian Hodder has described Çatalhöyük as a place where ritual was woven into everyday life. The shrines found within houses are not separate temples, but integrated into domestic spaces. Bull's horns, set into plastered walls, suggest the veneration of powerful animal spirits. Figurines of goddesses and animals, often discovered in caches, point to a belief system that emphasized fertility, cycles of life and death, and the interconnectedness of humans and nature. Archaeological evidence also shows that the people of Çatalhöyük were skilled in craft production. They made obsidian tools, ground grain with stone querns, and wove textiles. Their economy appears to have been based on a mix of farming, herding, and hunting, with trade networks extending far beyond the settlement. Obsidian from nearby volcanoes has been found as far away as the Levant. This suggests that Çatalhöyük was not an isolated experiment, but part of a wider world of exchange, innovation, and cultural contact. And yet, for all its complexity, Çatalhöyük eventually declined. After more than 1,000 years of occupation, the population dispersed, leaving the mound to accumulate layers of wind-blown soil and forgotten memory. The reasons for this decline remain unclear. Was it environmental change, overexploitation of resources, disease, or social pressures that drove its people away? Or was it simply the natural cycle of a community that had grown, thrived, and then moved on? To stand in the excavated rooms of Çatalhöyük today is to feel a closeness to its former inhabitants. The plastered walls still bear the faint traces of paint. The platforms where people once slept, worked, and prayed are still visible. It is as if the settlement has only just been vacated, as though its inhabitants might climb back down the roof ladders at any moment to tend their fires and tell their stories. Çatalhöyük invites us to reconsider the very definition of civilization. It shows that a city need not have kings or temples to be complex, that equality and cooperation can sustain urban life for centuries. It also reminds us that art, ritual, and memory were not luxuries of early society, but its very foundation. These murals are not simply decoration, they are the first pages of a visual history book, written not with words, but with images, encoding a worldview that bound the living, the dead, and the landscape into a single whole. As we leave this ancient mound, the wind carries dust across the plains, and the silence settles once again over the ruins. Somewhere beneath the earth lie more walls, more paintings, more stories waiting to be uncovered. Çatalhöyük does not give up its secrets easily, but what it has revealed so far is enough to remind us that the roots of urban life, of art, of religion, run deeper than we ever imagined, and that humanity's first cities were as much about dreaming as they were about dwelling. Chapter 12. The Ziggurat of Uruk. The dusty plains of southern Mesopotamia, where the Euphrates once meandered across fertile fields, a great structure rises from the earth like a stairway to the heavens. The Ziggurat of Uruk, even in its ruin, commands reverence. Its massive tiers of sun-baked brick are the skeletal remains of an age when gods were believed to walk among men, and when the city of Ur stood as one of the shining centers of the ancient world. Built more than 4,000 years ago, around 2100 BCE, the ziggurat was the crowning achievement of King Ur-Nammu, founder of the third dynasty of Ur. Dedicated to Nana, the Sumerian moon god, it embodied the very principle of a cosmos ordered by divine presence. In its time, the ziggurat would have towered above the flat horizon, its stepped platforms painted in vivid colors, black at the base for the underworld, red for the earth, and dazzling white at the summit for the heavens. Atop the uppermost terrace, a temple housed the cult image of Nana, visible for miles across the land. The structure itself was not a hollow shell. Beneath the outer facing of baked bricks, bound with bitumen, lay a solid core of mud brick, pressed and dried beneath the Mesopotamian sun. This was an architecture of permanence, a deliberate attempt to bind clay and cosmos together. The ziggurat was not meant for human use in the way a palace or home might be. Ordinary citizens never ascended its stairways. It was the axis mundi, the cosmic pillar, reserved for priests and kings who alone could mediate between earth and heaven. At its base stretched the city of Ur, a metropolis of as many as 65,000 people. Streets wound through neighborhoods of two-story mud brick houses, each with an inner courtyard where families gathered. Granaries, workshops, and schools of scribes testified to a highly organized society. Surrounding it all were fertile fields fed by irrigation canals, sustaining an economy that reached across the Near East. Merchants from Ur traded wool, grain, and textiles for copper from Oman, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and cedar from the mountains of Lebanon. Clay tablets inscribed with cuneiform record contracts, letters, hymns, and legal decrees, preserving the pulse of everyday life in this early urban civilization. The ziggurat itself was the heart of a larger sacred precinct. At its foot stood temples to Ningal, consort of Nana, and shrines to other deities. Rituals unfolded in a precise rhythm, guided by priests who watched the stars, prepared offerings, and recited hymns inscribed on tablets that still survive. During lunar festivals, processions would ascend toward the ziggurat, carrying food, drink, and incense as gifts for the divine. To the Sumerians, these were not symbolic gestures. They were acts of survival, binding the cycles of the moon to the cycles of harvest, ensuring balance between cosmic forces and earthly life. King Ur-Nammu, who commissioned the ziggurat, also gave the world one of the earliest known legal codes. Written on clay, his laws sought to establish justice in the land, setting penalties for theft, false witness, and bodily harm. In these fragments we glimpse not only the religious devotion of Ur, but its attempt to create a society ordered by law and balance, mirroring the cosmic order embodied by the ziggurat itself. His successor, Shulgi, continued this vision, expanding the temple complex and proclaiming himself a god-king, the living counterpart to the divine moon. Yet the glory of Ur was not eternal. By the close of the second millennium BCE, shifting rivers, invasions, and the long rhythms of decline brought ruin to the city. Sand and silt crept over the once fertile fields. The great ziggurat crumbled into a mound of weathered brick. Still, its memory lingered, preserved in later Babylonian and Assyrian traditions, where ziggurats remained symbols of divine presence. The concept of a sacred mountain rising from the flat plain would echo across Mesopotamian history, and perhaps even into the later myths of Babel. For millennia, the ruins lay buried, half forgotten. It was not until the mid-19th century that European explorers began to identify the mound of Tel el-Mokayyar as ancient Ur. Excavations in the 1920s and 30s, led by Sir Leonard Woolley, revealed the true scale of the city. Woolley uncovered royal tombs filled with gold, lapis, and sacrificial victims, evidence of a court culture that rivaled the splendor of Egypt. Most enduring of all, he cleared the great ziggurat, its stepped form emerging once more beneath the Mesopotamian sky. In the 20th century, the ziggurat underwent restoration under Saddam Hussein, its massive stairways rebuilt in modern brick to echo the ancient design. Today, visitors can ascend partway up its face, though the summit remains eroded and the temple long vanished. Even so, the impression is overwhelming. Standing before its rising tiers, one senses the ambition of a civilization that sought not merely to build, but to bridge worlds. The surrounding ruins of Ur remain partly unexplored, buried beneath layers of soil and salt. Beneath the desert surface, entire quarters of the ancient city may yet lie intact. Homes of merchants, records of trade, schools of scribes, shrines to forgotten gods. Each tablet already uncovered adds another voice to the chorus of the past. Yet the city is fragile. Rising groundwater and modern encroachment threaten to erode what remains, as if time itself conspires to reclaim what was once revealed. The Ziggurat of Ur is more than an ancient ruin. It is a symbol of humanity's first great experiment in urban life, in cosmic order, and in the attempt to anchor heaven to earth. Its bricks still hold the heat of the Mesopotamian sun. Its tiers still cast shadows that fall across a landscape once filled with canals and orchards. And as the desert wind moves across its weathered steps, one cannot help but wonder what else lies beneath. How many tablets remain buried? How many hymns unspoken? How many stories of kings, merchants, and priests remain sealed in the earth? The ziggurat endures, not only as a monument to what was, but as a reminder of what still waits in silence, waiting to be uncovered. Chapter 13. The Royal Tombs of Ur. Beneath the desert sands of southern Mesopotamia, hidden for over 4,000 years, lay one of the most haunting and spectacular discoveries of the ancient world: the Royal Tombs of Ur. When British archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley began his excavations here in the 1920s, he could not have imagined what he was about to uncover. What his team found was not merely a burial site, but a window into the ceremonial heart of early Sumerian civilization. A place where kings and queens were entombed with gold, music, and the lives of those who served them in life. Ur, once a thriving city on the banks of the Euphrates, was at its height around 2600 BCE, during the early dynastic period. It was a city of ziggurats and canals, of bustling markets and scribes pressing wet clay with the earliest known writing. The royal cemetery lay just beyond the city walls, a necropolis reserved for the elite. Woolley's excavations revealed over 100 to 800 graves, most of them simple, but among them were 16 tombs. Unlike any others, vast subterranean chambers filled with objects of breathtaking craftsmanship and the remains of entire retinues. Descending into these tombs even, today, or imagining doing so, is to feel time contract. In one of the richest, identified as the tomb of Queen Puabi, Woolley found a wealth of grave goods, headdresses of hammered gold, elaborate beadwork of carnelian and lapis lazuli, gold drinking cups, and tools of war. Puabi herself was discovered wearing a magnificent golden crown, its leaves and rosettes still gleaming after millennia. Her name was preserved on a cylinder seal, giving her an identity and a place in history. But it is not just the splendor of these burials that grips the imagination. It is their strangeness, even their darkness. Surrounding the central burial chambers were the so-called death pits, open courtyards, where dozens of attendants were laid out in orderly rows. Musicians still clutched their lyres, soldiers lay with their spears, Woolley believed these attendants had willingly taken poison, perhaps wine laced with a narcotic, in order to follow their ruler into the next life. Whether they went to their deaths willingly or under compulsion remains a question that cannot be answered. The effect is chilling. These were not symbolic figurines or statues, but living people who died to accompany their sovereign beyond the grave. The most famous of these objects is the Great Lyre of Ur, reconstructed from the fragments found in one of these pits. Its soundbox was decorated with a gold-plated bull's head and inlaid panels depicting scenes of animals performing human tasks, a kind of mythic procession perhaps meant to guide the dead through the underworld. Music, it seems, was meant to be part of the journey after death. One can imagine the last notes played on that lyre echoing in the tomb as the attendants took their final drink and lay down beside their queen. These discoveries tell us much about Sumerian beliefs. The Sumerians imagined the afterlife as a shadowy realm, a land of no return, where the dead lived on dust and darkness. To go there, accompanied by one's court, one's wealth, and one's music, may have been a way of carrying the best of life into a place otherwise grim and silent. The very act of burying so many attendants may have been a statement of power, a king or queen who could command loyalty even in death. Yet these rituals raise as many questions as they answer. Was this mass death truly voluntary, an act of devotion, or was it a duty imposed by the weight of tradition and divine command? Woolley believed the attendants went to their deaths peacefully, perhaps anesthetized, as their skeletons showed little sign of struggle. More recent analysis has revealed signs of blunt force trauma on some skulls, suggesting that at least some of the deaths were not so tranquil. What we are left with is a picture both awe-inspiring and unsettling, a glimpse of a society willing to sacrifice life on a grand scale to honor its dead. The royal tombs also illuminate the reach of Sumerian trade and craftsmanship. Lapis lazuli, a deep blue stone found in abundance at Ur, had to be imported from as far away as Afghanistan, meaning these objects represent not just local artistry, but international connections stretching across thousands of kilometers. Gold and silver, carnelian, shell, and copper, all of it flowed into Ur, turning the city into a hub where the wealth of the ancient world converged. Standing at the edge of one of these reconstructed tombs today, one is struck by the atmosphere, the mingling of glory and tragedy. These are not merely graves, but stages where death was transformed into ceremony, where a ruler's passing became a cosmic event. The artifacts, painstakingly restored and displayed in museums, still hold the power to captivate. The gaze of Pwabi's golden headdress, the delicate curve of a drinking cup, the haunting stillness of the lyre, all are fragments of a story that feels both intimate and impossibly distant. The royal cemetery of Ur forces us to confront the cost of kingship in the ancient world. It shows us a society that reached extraordinary heights of artistry and organization, but also demanded extraordinary things from its people, even the ultimate sacrifice. And as we imagine the last moments of those who lay down in the death pits, the sound of music fading in the torchlight, we are left with a question that hangs in the air. Did they go to their deaths in fear, in faith, or in something we can no longer name? As we leave the cemetery, the sands shift back over the graves, and the city of Ur fades again into the horizon of memory. The kings and queens lie in their gold and silence, their courts around them, still journeying through the shadowed world beyond. And we, looking back across 5,000 years, can only follow so far before the path into the underworld disappears into darkness. Chapter 14. The Flood Tablet of Nineveh. In the shadow of ancient Nineveh, where the Tigris once curved past walls that stretched for miles, the whispers of forgotten empires lay buried beneath the dust. It was here, in the mid-19th century, that explorers digging through the ruins of a long-vanished library uncovered fragments of clay that would shake the very foundations of biblical history. Thousands of tablets, inscribed with the wedge-shaped marks of cuneiform, lay scattered in the debris of the royal archives of Ashurbanipal, last great king of Assyria. Among them was a broken text that told of a flood so vast, so cataclysmic, that it seemed to echo across time into traditions far beyond Mesopotamia. This was the Flood Tablet, one of the most famous fragments of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Its lines spoke of Utnapishtim, the survivor chosen by the gods to build a great boat, to preserve life from the waters of destruction. For a Victorian audience steeped in the certainty of biblical chronology, the discovery was nothing short of staggering. Here was a story of deluge and salvation, written centuries before Genesis, preserved not in scripture, but in clay. The Library of Ashurbanipal itself was a marvel of ambition. Founded in the 7th century BCE, it gathered knowledge from across Mesopotamia, myths, hymns, medical texts, omens, and chronicles. In its prime, it may have held over 30,000 tablets, carefully catalogued and stored within the royal palace. When Nineveh fell to the Medes and Babylonians in 612 BCE, the palace burned, but the fire only hardened the clay, preserving it for millennia beneath layers of rubble. For 2,000 years, the knowledge of Mesopotamia lay silent until modern spades unearthed it. It was the Assyriologist George Smith, working at the British Museum in the 1870s, who first pieced together the Flood Tablet. As he deciphered the cuneiform signs, the story unfolded with astonishing clarity. The gods, angered by humanity's clamour, had resolved to send a flood to wipe out all life. Yet the god Ea whispered to Utnapishtim, warning him to build a great vessel. He was to take aboard his family, craftsmen, and the seed of all living things. The storm raged, the waters covered even the mountain peaks, and after 7 days, the boat came to rest upon a distant summit. A dove and a raven were released, and when the land dried, Utnapishtim made offerings to the gods. The parallels with the biblical account of Noah are unmistakable. Both tell of divine wrath, of a chosen survivor, of birds sent to test the receding waters, and of sacrifice offered in gratitude. Yet the Mesopotamian version is older by at least a millennium. The Epic of Gilgamesh, in which the flood tale is embedded, was compiled in the Old Babylonian period, around the 18th century BCE, though its roots reach back further still, into Sumerian tradition. Tablets from the city of Nippur contain flood motifs dating to the early 2nd millennium BCE, suggesting that the story had circulated for centuries before it was written down in Nineveh. For scholars of the 19th century, this discovery was unsettling. The Bible, long seen as the earliest and most authoritative record of human history, now seemed to echo older traditions. Was the Genesis flood narrative derived from Mesopotamian myth, or did both accounts preserve a cultural memory of a real cataclysm in deep antiquity? The question remains unresolved. Some researchers suggest that the Mesopotamian flood stories reflect the unpredictable violence of the Tigris and Euphrates, rivers prone to sudden inundation that could wipe away entire settlements. Others point to geological evidence of dramatic flooding events in the Near East during the transition from the last ice age, when rising seas reshaped coastlines and submerged ancient landscapes. In this view, the flood story is not mere myth, but a memory, carried and reshaped through generations until it became mythic in form. The Flood Tablet also offers insight into Mesopotamian cosmology. To the scribes of Nineveh, the flood was not a moral judgment upon humanity's sin, as in the later biblical account, but an act of divine irritation, the gods disturbed by the noise of humankind. In the chaos of Mesopotamian deities, humanity was small, fragile, subject to whims of power beyond comprehension. Salvation came not through righteousness, but through the favor of one God, the whisper of a secret, and the obedience to build. Utnapishtim himself is a figure of haunting mystery. Granted immortality after the flood, he dwells at the edge of the world, beyond the waters of death. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero seeks him out in a desperate quest to learn the secret of eternal life. The flood story is thus embedded not only as an account of destruction, but as a gateway to the greater theme of mortality and the search for meaning. The physical tablet itself bears marks of its long journey. Written in Akkadian cuneiform, its text is fragmentary, with gaps where the clay broke apart. Yet enough remains to convey the essential tale. Its discovery electrified not only scholars, but the public imagination. Newspapers in Victorian London carried reports of the Chaldean flood story, and George Smith himself was celebrated as the man who had uncovered proof of an antediluvian tradition, older than the Bible. Since then, further discoveries have filled in the picture. Fragments from other sites confirm multiple versions of the flood myth, including Sumerian accounts in which the survivor is called Ziusudra, and Babylonian versions that name him Atrahasis. Each variation reshapes the details, yet the core remains: divine anger, a chosen man, a great boat, the preservation of life, and the renewal of the world. What does it mean that cultures across the world, from Mesopotamia to India, from Greece to the Americas, preserve flood myths in their traditions? Is this convergence evidence of a shared memory, of a catastrophe that scarred humanity's earliest civilizations? Or does water, as the most primal of forces, naturally inspire myths of destruction and rebirth wherever human communities settle along rivers and seas? The Flood Tablet of Nineveh stands at the crossroads of these questions. It is both artifact and echo, both myth and history. Its lines carry the voices of ancient scribes, the anxieties of riverine peoples, and the enduring human need to explain survival in the face of overwhelming destruction. In the museum glass where it rests today, the clay bears no trace of the storms it describes, yet its words continue to ripple outward, unsettling assumptions, raising questions that refuse to be silenced. Did the ancients preserve a memory of real events, long before history began? Or do these stories reveal something deeper, a universal archetype of loss and renewal, etched into human consciousness from the beginning? The waters have receded, the cities of Mesopotamia have crumbled, yet the Flood Tablet endures. A fragment of clay that bridges myth and scripture, earth and memory, leaving us to wonder what other stories still lie buried in the ruins of forgotten libraries. Chapter 15. The Lost City of Akkad. Somewhere beneath the shifting alluvium of Mesopotamia lies a city that once commanded the known world. Akkad, the glittering capital of the Akkadian Empire, was the seat of Sargon the Great, the first man in recorded history to forge a true empire. From this city, Sargon extended his rule over Sumer, Elam, Mari, Ebla, and beyond, linking the fertile plains of Mesopotamia under one crown. Yet today, Akkad streets are silent, its walls erased, its temples unmarked on any map. Though its name appears on hundreds of cuneiform tablets, its exact location has never been found. The capital of the world's first empire has become, ironically, one of history's most enduring absences. The story of Akkad begins in the 24th century BCE, when Sargon, a man of obscure birth, rose from cupbearer to king. In later legends, he is described as a foundling set afloat in a basket on the river, recalling motifs that would echo later in the stories of Moses and others. Whatever his true beginnings, his reign transformed Mesopotamia. He conquered the great city-states of Sumer, unified their writing system, and created a standing army that allowed him to project power farther than any ruler before him. His empire stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean, a network of trade, tribute, and military might. And at the heart of it all was Akkad, or Agade, as the cuneiform tablets name it, a city said to be resplendent with temples, palaces, and granaries filled with the wealth of conquered lands. Ancient hymns describe its temples as glittering with gold and lapis lazuli, its streets thronged with envoys from foreign lands, and its king seated like a god among men. For over a century, Akkad stood as the center of power in the ancient Near East. But then, suddenly it was gone. By the end of the 3rd millennium BCE, the Akkadian Empire had collapsed, and the capital's name faded from contemporary inscriptions. Later, scribes remembered it only in lamentations, mourning its destruction in haunting poetry. The storm took away the city, one text laments. Its people were carried off like grasshoppers. What destroyed Akkad remains a matter of debate, and part of its enduring mystery. Some scholars point to climate change. Around 2200 BCE, evidence suggests a dramatic drying of the climate, part of what is sometimes called the 4.2 kilo-year event. Droughts may have withered crops, causing famine and political instability. The once thriving trade routes could have collapsed, leaving the city vulnerable. Others point to outside invasion. The Gutians, a mountain people from the Zagros range, are often blamed in later texts for the sack of Akkad, though these sources may be as much myth as history. Still others wonder whether the empire imploded from within, undone by overreach, rebellion, and the strain of maintaining far-flung provinces. Despite decades of searching, Akkad's ruins have never been identified with certainty. Scholars have proposed numerous candidate sites along the Tigris and Euphrates, near modern Baghdad, near Sippar, even farther north toward the Diyala region. But none have produced definitive inscriptions bearing the city's name. Some think it lies beneath layers of alluvial soil, buried too deeply to be easily detected. Others suggest that it may have been built of mud brick, like so many Mesopotamian cities, and has simply melted back into the plain, leaving little behind. This absence makes Akkad a kind of ghost in the archaeological record. Its empire is well documented, its kings known, its language preserved on clay tablets, yet its very heart remains elusive. Excavators in Mesopotamia can uncover entire ziggurats and temples from earlier Sumerian cities, yet the capital of the Akkadian world seems to have slipped through our fingers. The mystery deepens when we read the surviving texts that speak of its destruction. The Curse of Akkad, a Mesopotamian literary work, attributes the city's fall to divine wrath, describing how the gods withdrew their favor and sent famine and invasion as punishment. This was more than just a historical memory. It was a moral lesson. To later generations, Akkad became a warning about hubris and the overreach of kings. And so we are left with an enigma. Did Akkad fall beneath the sands in a single cataclysmic moment? Or was its decline slow, its population drifting away until only ruins remained? Did it leave traces we have simply not yet recognized? Somewhere beneath the fields of Iraq, perhaps lie the outlines of its streets, the foundations of its temples, the bones of those who lived in its golden age. Standing on the floodplain today, it is hard to imagine the imperial capital that once commanded armies and diplomats from across the Fertile Crescent. The silence of the landscape almost heightens the mystery, as if Akkad does not want to be found. And perhaps that is its final power, to remain half in legend, half in history, reminding us that even the mightiest empires can vanish without a trace. The search continues. Each new survey, each satellite scan, each excavation trench dug into the Mesopotamian plain carries with it the hope that we may finally walk Akkad's streets once again. Until then, the lost city remains an unanswered question, a blank space in the map of the world's first empire. A reminder that there are still places where history itself lies hidden, waiting to be uncovered. Chapter 16. The Girsu Bridge and Sumerian engineering amid the flat, windswept plains of southern Iraq, where ancient riverbeds once carved lifelines through the desert, lies the site of Girsu, known today as Tello. Here, in what was once one of the great cities of Sumer, archaeologists have uncovered a structure that speaks of ingenuity older than empires. Beneath layers of earth and time, they found what is now believed to be one of the world's oldest known bridges, built more than 4,000 years ago. The discovery at Girsu is more than a remnant of stone and brick. It is a glimpse into the engineering genius of the Sumerians, a people who transformed the unpredictable landscape of Mesopotamia into the foundation of the world's first urban civilizations. The bridge, spanning what was once a canal or river channel, reveals not only technical skill, but also social organization, a community capable of planning, designing and executing large-scale public works. For centuries, Sumer was sustained by water. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers flooded unpredictably, offering fertile soil but also destruction. To thrive here required mastery over water itself. The Sumerians became pioneers of irrigation, carving canals into the plain, constructing reservoirs, and regulating flows through an intricate network of channels. The bridge at Girsu must be seen within this broader context, not merely as a crossing, but as part of a larger system of control, distribution, and connection. Archaeological surveys reveal that the bridge was built of baked brick and stone, held together with bitumen, the black pitch that served as mortar across Mesopotamia. Its scale suggests more than a temporary solution. This was a lasting structure, capable of bearing the traffic of carts, animals, and foot travelers, linking neighborhoods, fields, or perhaps even sacred precincts. Such permanence hints at deliberate planning by rulers and administrators who viewed infrastructure not as incidental, but as central to their vision of a city. Girsu itself was a city of great significance. During the 3rd millennium BCE, it served as a religious and political center of the state of Lagash. Its temple to Ningersu, the city's patron deity, rose as a focal point of devotion and power. Kings such as Gudea left inscriptions boasting of canals dug, temples raised, and offerings made. One statue of Gudea describes him as a builder king, one who measured out plans on a clay tablet before laying foundations. The bridge uncovered in modern excavations may well have been part of this same legacy, evidence of rulers who saw construction as a sacred duty. The presence of such a bridge challenges earlier assumptions about the timeline of complex engineering. For decades, historians imagined that large-scale public works, bridges, aqueducts, highways, emerged much later, in the classical civilizations of Rome, Greece, or Imperial China. Yet here, in the soil of ancient Sumer, lies proof that such undertakings were already present in the early Bronze Age. 4,000 years before modern asphalt roads, Sumerian engineers were shaping landscapes with enduring precision. What drove such innovation? Survival, certainly, but also vision. Inscriptions from Lagash describe vast efforts to reclaim marshlands, to channel rivers, to make barren land fertile. The bridge at Girsu was not simply utilitarian. It embodied a philosophy that through careful planning and divine sanction, humans could bring order to chaos. The gods themselves were thought to grant authority to such endeavors. To build a bridge was to weave the fabric of society together, both literally and symbolically. The scale of coordination required cannot be overlooked. To construct such a bridge demanded skilled laborers, supplies of stone and bitumen transported over distance, overseers to organize tasks, and scribes to record the work. This was not the project of a single artisan, but the achievement of a state apparatus. A city whose rulers commanded resources and manpower in service of a collective goal. Today, the site of Girsu is quiet, its ruins worn by centuries of erosion and neglect. Yet the bridge's discovery has brought renewed attention to the sophistication of the Sumerians. It is a reminder that the foundations of engineering stretch back far deeper into antiquity than we once imagined. Every brick placed was an act of defiance against the wilderness, a statement that even in a harsh and shifting landscape, permanence could be carved. The bridge also invites us to reconsider how we define progress. The Sumerians lacked iron, wheels of precision, or modern mathematics. Yet with clay, stone, and pitch, they built not only bridges but entire cities bound by water and road. Their ingenuity lay not in technology as we know it, but in organization, in vision, in the will to shape their environment toward permanence. Standing before the remnants of this ancient bridge, one can almost imagine the sound of carts rolling across, the shuffle of traders carrying goods, the prayers of priests moving toward the temple of Ningirsu. It was a crossing between worlds, between fields and city, between sacred and profane, between the ordinary flow of daily life and the enduring structures that outlived those who built them. And though the channel it once spanned has long since dried, its presence remains, a silent witness to a civilization that, 4,000 years ago, imagined not just how to survive, but how to build in stone and clay the promise of continuity. The Bridge of Girsu does not give us all its secrets. Was it primarily for ritual processions? Did it connect temple complexes, or was it a more pragmatic link, part of the arteries of trade and movement that kept the city alive? The answers may remain hidden beneath the soil. What is clear is that the Sumerians were far more than the inventors of writing and law. They were builders of landscapes, engineers of permanence. Their bridge at Girsu stands as a fragment of that vision. A reminder that even in the earliest dawn of civilization, humanity was already learning to span divides, both of water and of time. Chapter 17, the Enuma Elish Creation Tablets. In the ruins of the great library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh, amid shattered tablets of law, prophecy, and ritual, archaeologists unearthed a series of 7 clay tablets inscribed in cuneiform. When pieced together, they revealed one of the oldest surviving creation epics known to humanity, the Enuma Elish, When on High. These texts do not read like mere stories. They are hymns of cosmic origin, a glimpse into how the Babylonians believed the universe came to be. The story begins before the shaping of the heavens, before the founding of cities, or the ploughing of fields. It begins with primordial waters, Apsu, the sweet waters below, and Tiamat, the salt waters above, mingling in chaos. From their union came the first gods, who multiplied and filled the void with their noise. The younger gods stirred unrest in the deep until Apsu plotted to destroy them. But Ea, the god of wisdom, struck first, killing Apsu and seizing his power. This act enraged Tiamat, the Great Mother, who birthed an army of monstrous creatures. Serpents, scorpion men, dragons, to avenge her slain consort. It is then that Marduk, the champion of the younger gods, rises. He agrees to face Tiamat in battle, but only on one condition, that he be made king of the gods if he is victorious. The others consent, granting him their divine weapons. In a clash that reverberates through the cosmic order, Marduk ensnares Tiamat in his net, pierces her with an arrow, and splits her body in two. With one half, he fashions the vault of heaven. with the other, the foundation of the earth. From her eyes he lets flow the Tigris and Euphrates. The world, in this vision, is literally the body of a slain goddess, a reminder that creation is born from violence, order from chaos. When these tablets were first translated in the late 19th century by George Smith, they caused a sensation. Here was a creation story older than the Hebrew Bible, one that seemed to echo the Genesis narrative of a watery beginning, the separation of heaven and earth, and the formation of humankind. In the Enuma Elish, Marduk fashions humans from the blood of Kingu, Tiamat's chosen champion, mixing it with clay so that mortals might serve the gods and bear the burden of labor. The parallels and contrasts to later traditions raise profound questions about the transmission of myth across time. Were these motifs borrowed, shared, or independently imagined? The tablets themselves date to the late 2nd millennium BCE, but the story they tell is thought to be much older, perhaps reaching back to Sumerian prototypes. In those earlier myths, it is not Marduk but other deities, Enlil, Ninurta, who battle the forces of chaos. The Enuma Elish may have been crafted during the rise of Babylon as a theological statement, elevating Marduk to the supreme position among the gods and justifying Babylon's claim as the center of the cosmos. In this sense, the epic is not merely mythic poetry, but royal propaganda, designed to weave the city's destiny into the very structure of creation itself. Each year during the Akitu, the Babylonian New Year festival, the Enuma Elish was recited aloud in the Temple of Marduk. This was no casual reading. It was a ritual reenactment of creation, a reaffirmation that order still triumphed over chaos. The king himself took part, ritually humbling himself before the statue of Marduk, so that the divine order might be renewed for another year. These ceremonies remind us that myth was not distant entertainment, but a living act, a performance that sustained the world. As we study these tablets today, we are struck by their dual nature. On the one hand, they are fragments of clay, brittle and broken, carrying wedge-shaped signs that must be painstakingly deciphered. On the other, they are living voices, speaking of a time when the universe was raw and God still walked the earth. Their narrative rhythm, with its repetitions and invocations, is almost hypnotic, as if meant to be heard in the glow of lamplight within a temple. And yet, many questions remain. How far back does this mythic pattern truly go? Is it a memory of real cosmic events, recast in symbolic form, or is it a psychological map, a story humans tell themselves to make sense of the tension between chaos and order, death and life? Some researchers wonder whether the monstrous army of Tiamat recalls ancient fears of floods, storms, and the wild creatures of the Mesopotamian marshlands, forces that early city dwellers sought to tame. Others read it as an allegory for political upheaval, with Marduk representing the triumph of a new power over older, chaotic factions. There is also the question of what was lost. The tablets from Nineveh were not complete. Some lines are missing, others broken. We reconstruct the story from parallels and later copies, but the full power of its recitation may have included chants, ritual gestures, or visual symbols that we no longer possess. The ancient world did not separate myth from ritual. It was all one fabric, and so we are left with only a partial tapestry. Standing before these tablets in the British Museum today, one cannot help but feel their weight, not just their physical heft, but their cultural gravity. They represent a bridge across 4,000 years, linking us with the priests who once pressed these signs into wet clay. We are reminded that our own stories of origins, whatever form they take, are part of a much longer human conversation. As the chapter of the Enuma Elish closes, we are left with a haunting image: the earth beneath our feet, the sky above our heads as the remains of a slain goddess. Whether we take this literally or symbolically, it carries a quiet suggestion that creation is never simple, never bloodless, and that the order we live within was won at a cost. In that silent thought, we feel the ancient priests' hope that the cosmos will remain stable for another season, another year, another generation, and so the tablets sit silent now, but still whispering of the time when the world was first divided and named. Their mystery remains, urging us to listen closer, to imagine the voices that once called the universe into being, and to wonder what other stories of creation may yet lie buried beneath the sands. Chapter 18. The Step Pyramid of Djoseron. The desert plateau of Saqqara, just beyond the shadow of Cairo, rises a monument unlike any that came before it. Weathered by more than 4,500 years, the Step Pyramid of Djoser still commands the horizon. A vast, tiered structure of stone that marked the dawn of an age. To the ancient Egyptians, this was not merely a tomb. It was a cosmic machine, an eternal stairway by which a king might ascend toward the heavens. And to us, it stands as the first true pyramid, the beginning of an architectural lineage that would culminate in the wonders of Giza. The Step Pyramid was commissioned during Egypt's third dynasty, around 2650 BCE, by Pharaoh Netjerikhet, better known today as Djoser. But its true genius may not belong solely to the king. Instead, history remembers another name: Imhotep, priest, physician, astronomer, engineer. Imhotep was the architect who conceived a vision that had never before been attempted. While earlier rulers were interred beneath simple mastaba tombs, rectangular mounds of mud brick, Imhotep envisioned something greater. He would stack mastabas one upon another, rising in 6 stages toward the sky. In that act of audacity, he created the first monumental structure in cut stone, a technological and symbolic leap that reshaped the landscape of eternity. At its completion, the Step Pyramid rose some 62 meters above the desert floor, its base stretching over 120 by 109 meters. For the people of the Nile, who had known only brick and wood, the sight must have been overwhelming. A mountain carved by human hands, designed to endure for eternity. Even today, the sharp angles of its terraces speak of purpose and permanence, of a king determined that his reign would not end with his mortal breath. Yet what meets the eye above ground is only part of the story. Beneath the pyramid sprawls a labyrinth of tunnels, shafts, and chambers extending for nearly 6 kilometers. Deep within lies the king's burial chamber, sealed with massive granite blocks. Surrounding it are storerooms meant to house provisions for the afterlife. Jars of beer, baskets of grain, and vessels of precious oils. Carved reliefs of blue faience tiles line the walls of certain passages, shimmering like the vault of the heavens, creating the illusion that the king walked eternally beneath the stars. To descend into this underworld is to enter a second pyramid, inverted into the earth, as intricate as the monument above. The pyramid did not stand alone. It was the heart of a vast ceremonial complex, enclosed by a limestone wall that stretched more than 1,600 meters around. Within its bounds lay courtyards, shrines, and chapels, many of them dummies, buildings with no interior, facades carved only for ritual. These structures were not meant for the living, but for the eternal dramas of kingship. Here, the Sed festival, the great renewal ritual, could be enacted again and again. In these sacred courts, Djoser might symbolically run between markers, proving his strength to rule forever, long after his body had turned to dust. Archaeologists who have studied the complex note its astonishing level of planning. Stone walls were carved to mimic wooden beams and reed matting, a transformation of earlier materials into enduring limestone. This was architecture not of necessity, but of symbolism, a conscious effort to freeze Egypt's traditions in imperishable stone. Every block carried a message that the king's house, his reign, his place in the cosmos was eternal. Imhotep's role in this achievement cannot be overstated. Unlike most royal architects, his name survived across centuries, whispered in temples long after his death. To later Egyptians, he became a figure of legend, deified as a god of wisdom and healing. In Greek times, he was compared to Asclepius, the physician god. Some even saw in him a proto-sage, a man who had touched divine knowledge. That the Step Pyramid stands at Saqqara is testament enough to his genius, but perhaps it also hints at a deeper story, one where human ingenuity and sacred vision intertwined. The Step Pyramid's influence radiated far beyond Djoser's reign. Later pharaohs of the Old Kingdom would attempt their own variations, the pyramids at Meidum, Dashur, and ultimately the Great Plateau of Giza. Each was a refinement of the idea first tested at Saqqara, the transformation of stone into a cosmic stairway. Yet none of these later marvels can erase the audacity of the first. Here, for the first time, humanity moved beyond impermanent mud brick into the realm of eternity, carving their faith into the desert itself. And yet, mysteries remain. The labyrinth beneath the pyramid, though extensively mapped, has yielded tantalizing questions. Some passages seem ceremonial, others defensive. Certain shafts descend into darkness with no apparent purpose. Could these have been symbolic journeys for the king's soul? Or do they hint at functions we no longer understand? Among the debris, excavators have uncovered alabaster vessels inscribed with the names of earlier kings, suggesting that Djoser's tomb may have been a repository of dynastic memory, a place where past rulers were honored or even concealed. The survival of the pyramid is itself a paradox. Centuries of earthquakes and looting have scarred its facade, leaving cracks and missing stone. For a time in the modern era, it seemed near collapse, its outer layers ready to crumble. Only recent restoration efforts have stabilized its form, preserving it for a new age of viewers. But such restoration raises another question. How much of what we see today is Djoser's, and how much is modern reconstruction? Does the monument we gaze upon carry the same aura as the one that rose from the sands more than 4 millennia ago? Or are we beholding a shadow, a reimagined relic of a vision partly lost? Beneath the questions of engineering and preservation lingers a deeper mystery. Why here? Why then? What compelled Djoser and Imhotep to break with tradition, to leave behind the tried and tested mastaba for a wholly new form? Was it simply ambition, the desire of a king to outshine his predecessors? Or was it something greater, a theological shift, a new understanding of how the king should dwell among the gods after death? The pyramid's very shape offers a clue. The 6 steps may represent a stairway, a ladder to the heavens. In ancient Egyptian texts, the king was often described as ascending to the sky, joining the imperishable stars, or climbing the celestial ladder guarded by Horus and Set. The step pyramid may have been the first architectural attempt to give form to this idea, a literal rendering of myth into stone. If so, then each tier was not merely a block of masonry, but a rung of eternity. And yet, there are whispers of other interpretations. Some have suggested that the pyramid reflects an older memory, a symbolic mountain rising from the primeval waters of creation, the Benben mound of Heliopolitan theology. In this reading, Djoser's tomb was not just a ladder, but a recreation of the first land, a place where order emerged from chaos. To build such a monument was to reenact creation itself, ensuring that the king would be reborn with the rising sun. The step pyramid of Saqqara is therefore more than stone. It is myth-given form, a junction where architecture and theology meet. To walk its courtyards today is to move through a landscape designed not for the living, but for eternity, where doorways open into nothing, chapels echo without prayers, and walls stand as eternal facades for rituals long forgotten. And as the sun sinks over the desert plateau, the pyramid casts a long shadow across the sands. It is a shadow that stretches not only across Saqqara, but across time, into the pyramids of Giza, into the myths of later ages, even into our own imagination. Beneath its steps lie questions we may never fully answer. Was Imhotep's vision born solely of human genius, or of something more? Did Djoser's pyramid serve only a king, or did it encode a memory of creation itself? The stones remain silent, weathered but enduring. They invite us to look upward, as the ancient Egyptians once did, and to wonder what it means to ascend beyond the horizon of mortality. Chapter 19. The Rosetta Stone and Lost Language of the Pharaohs. In the summer of 1799, near the Nile Delta town of Rosetta, modern Rashid, French soldiers, under Napoleon's command, uncovered a slab of dark granodiorite that would change the study of Egypt forever. It was not an imposing piece of stone at first glance, merely a fragment of a larger stele, its top broken and worn, but its surface bore 3 columns of writing, one in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, one in Demotic script, and one in Greek. This single artifact would become the key to unlocking a language that had been silent for nearly 15 centuries. For generations, the voices of the pharaohs had been mute. Travelers from Greece and Rome had marveled at Egypt's temples and monuments. But by late antiquity, the knowledge of how to read their carved inscriptions had been lost. Hieroglyphs were no longer seen as a phonetic system, but as mystical symbols, thought to hide esoteric wisdom. Medieval writers speculated wildly about their meaning. Even in the Renaissance, scholars misinterpreted them as a symbolic code, failing to grasp that they could record speech at all. The Rosetta Stone changed that. Its Greek inscription was quickly translated, revealing that the text was a royal decree issued during the reign of Ptolemy V in 196 BCE. Because the decree was rendered in 3 scripts, it offered a comparative key. Scholars now had a direct bridge between a known language and the enigmatic hieroglyphs. The race to decipher Egypt's lost script had begun. Thomas Young, an English polymath, made the first crucial breakthroughs. He identified several proper names written within oval shapes, cartouches, and proposed that they represented royal names. This was a radical suggestion, as it implied that hieroglyphs were not purely symbolic but partly phonetic. Yet it would be Jean-François Champollion, the brilliant French linguist, who carried the work to its conclusion. Champollion devoted years to the problem, comparing cartouches, cataloguing signs, and cross-referencing Coptic, the later liturgical language of Egypt that still preserved echoes of its ancient tongue. In 1822, he announced his discovery. Hieroglyphs were a complex writing system, combining phonetic signs, logograms, and determinatives. With this revelation, the silent temples began to speak again. The impact was immediate and profound. Suddenly, the inscriptions on tomb walls, the prayers carved into sarcophagi, and the chronicles etched into temple pylons could be read. Egypt was no longer a land of mute monuments. It was a civilization with a voice. The stories of its kings, its wars, its religious rituals, and its hymns to the gods came flooding back. What had seemed like a dreamscape of sphinxes and obelisks was revealed to be a living culture with centuries of recorded memory. Yet, even as the Rosetta Stone unlocked this flood of understanding, it also reminded us how fragile human memory can be. For over 1,000 years, Egypt's own language had been forgotten, leaving entire libraries of inscriptions indecipherable. Whole epochs of history remained inaccessible until that moment of decipherment. The stone thus stands as a symbol of both loss and recovery, a reminder that what we know of the past is only as secure as the keys we hold to unlock it. Even now, our understanding is far from complete. Thousands of texts remain untranslated or only partially understood. Some are damaged beyond reconstruction, others sit in museum storerooms, waiting for scholars with the time and expertise to bring them to light. Each new translation can reshape what we think we know, altering chronologies, revealing forgotten rulers, or uncovering details about daily life, medicine, law, and belief. And there are mysteries that remain untouched. Certain hieroglyphic signs still puzzle epigraphers. Some religious texts speak in cryptic language, layered with symbolic meaning that resists easy interpretation. The Egyptians themselves sometimes intentionally obscured their words, using esoteric scripts and hidden inscriptions meant only for the gods. The full voice of Egypt, it seems, has not yet been heard. Standing before the Rosetta Stone today, encased in glass in the British Museum, one feels its strange gravity. It is not beautiful in the way of golden masks or painted coffins, yet it holds something more powerful, the key to memory itself. Its surface bears the chisel marks of an ancient decree, but its deeper message is about the human will to recover what has been lost. We are reminded that civilizations can fall silent, not only through physical destruction, but through the disappearance of their language. Without the means to read them, the past becomes as distant as another planet. And so we listen harder, search deeper, trying to recover what was almost erased. As the light falls on the stone's dark surface, it seems to whisper of other keys yet undiscovered, other scripts still waiting for their Champollion. Perhaps somewhere, beneath sand or soil, lies another Rosetta Stone, a missing link to languages still beyond our grasp. Until then, the story of Egypt remains half revealed, half veiled, urging us to continue decoding the silence of the pharaohs. Chapter 20, The Library of Ashurbanipalin. The ruins of Nineveh, once the proud capital of the Assyrian Empire, a silence lingers. Beneath layers of earth and centuries of dust, archaeologists uncovered a treasure that changed the story of the ancient world. Not gold nor jewels, but words. Tens of thousands of clay tablets pressed with the wedge-shaped script of cuneiform. Together they formed what is now called the Library of Ashurbanipal, the first great royal library in recorded history. The library belonged to Ashurbanipal, king of Assyria in the 7th century BCE. His reign marked both the height and the twilight of his empire, a realm that stretched from the mountains of Anatolia to the shores of the Persian Gulf. Unlike most conquerors, Ashurbanipal was not remembered solely for war. He was a scholar king, a man who claimed he could read the obscure languages of Sumer and Akkad, and who boasted that he delighted in the study of texts older than memory. Within his palace at Nineveh, He gathered knowledge from across Mesopotamia. Scribes copied hymns, rituals, omens, medical recipes, and incantations. They recorded star charts, flood myths, treaties, and royal annals. In time, over 30,000 fragments accumulated, stacked in rooms and corridors. It was here that the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's oldest stories, was preserved, not in a single copy, but in many, ensuring its survival even through the empire's collapse. The discovery of this library in the mid-19th century was itself a story of rediscovery. In 1849, the British adventurer and archaeologist Austen Henry Layard, together with his assistant Hormuzd Rassam, uncovered the ruins of Nineveh. Amid fallen walls and shattered reliefs, they found heaps of clay tablets, hardened and blackened by fire. When Nineveh fell to a coalition of Babylonians and Medes in 612 BCE, the palace had been burned. Wooden shelves, scrolls, and fragile papyri were consumed, leaving only clay. Yet it was precisely that fire that preserved them, baking the tablets into permanence. What might have perished endured by accident across 25 centuries. When scholars began to read them, the world was shaken. Among the first translations emerged the Flood Tablet, a passage from the Epic of Gilgamesh describing a deluge, a great boat, and a survivor who carried the seed of life through waters of destruction. The echoes of the biblical story of Noah were unmistakable, yet this account was centuries older. Suddenly, the roots of familiar traditions seemed deeper, entangled in a far older soil. For Victorian readers, the discovery was both thrilling and unsettling. It suggested that the Bible was not unique in its tales of cosmic disaster, but part of a much larger tapestry of memory. But the Library of Ashurbanipal was more than myths. It contained treatises on medicine, recipes for treating wounds, instructions for exorcisms, and guides to the liver divination practiced by Mesopotamian priests. Astronomical records charted the movements of Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, their patterns read as omens of war or peace. Administrative tablets preserved the rhythm of daily life, lists of workers, shipments of grain, and legal contracts that tethered the empire together. In this library, one can still hear the heartbeat of a civilization, vast and complex, reaching across millennia. Yet questions remain. Did Ashurbanipal gather these texts as a true archive out of a desire to preserve knowledge? Or were they trophies of conquest, looted from Babylon and other cities, piled into Nineveh as symbols of imperial power? Some inscriptions boast that the king sent scribes throughout Mesopotamia to copy rare works and bring them to his palace. Others suggest that entire libraries were seized in war. If so, then the library was not only a center of learning, but also a monument to domination, knowledge gathered by conquest, bound to the fate of empire. What was lost when Nineveh burned can never be known. The tablets that survive number in the tens of thousands, yet they are fragments of something greater. For every text we can read, there are countless others that crumbled into dust, or were written on perishable materials that fire erased forever. Imagine the shelves of papyrus, the scrolls of leather, the wooden tablets coated in wax, all gone. The library we hold in our museums is but the skeletal frame of what once existed. And yet, what remains is astonishing. Today, the tablets of Ashurbanipal's library are scattered across collections in London, Paris, and beyond. Scholars still sift through them, piecing together broken fragments, stitching myths and rituals back into coherence. Each year, new translations emerge, revealing details of ancient life, a new hymn, a forgotten myth, an administrative order. The library is not a closed book, but an ongoing excavation of memory. The presence of the Epic of Gilgamesh within the library reminds us of how close we came to losing humanity's earliest epic. Without Nineveh's fall, without the fire that consumed the city, perhaps the text would never have survived to reach us. Was it fate or coincidence that ensured its preservation? The very act of destruction, intended to erase an empire, inadvertently safeguarded its voice for the future. And so the Library of Ashurbanipal stands at the crossroads of paradox. It was an archive born of empire and war, preserved by fire and rediscovered in ruin. It is both a treasure of knowledge and a reminder of loss, a fragment of what was surely vaster. We can read its tablets, but we can also sense the silence between them. The voices that are gone, the stories erased, the knowledge scattered like ash on the wind. As the desert night falls over the mounds of Nineveh, One cannot help but wonder what other libraries lie buried, waiting for rediscovery. How many stories remain hidden beneath sand and stone? And how much of the past will forever remain unread? Chapter 21. The Piri Reis Map, an Ancient Cartography. In 1929, a group of scholars working in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace made an astonishing discovery. In a dusty stack of overlooked manuscripts lay a fragmentary world map, drawn on gazelle skin. Its ink and colours still vibrant after 4 centuries. Its maker was Piri Reis, an Ottoman admiral and cartographer who lived during the height of the empire's naval power. The date was 1513, barely 2 decades after Columbus's first voyage across the Atlantic. Yet this map, despite being made so soon after Europe's first contact with the Americas, showed coastlines and geographic details that should have been impossible to know. The Piri Reis map is most famous for its depiction of the eastern coastline of South America with surprising accuracy. Some researchers have claimed that its rendering of the southernmost tip, extending toward what looks like a connected landmass, resembles Antarctica, but not as it is seen today, beneath its massive ice cap. Instead, they argue, it shows the Antarctic coastline as if it were ice-free. This claim, controversial though it is, has fueled decades of debate and speculation. Piri Reis himself left us clues about the origins of his chart. In the marginal notes he wrote along its edges, he claimed that his map was not entirely original, but compiled from about 20 source maps, some of which he said were from the time of Alexander the Great. He claimed to have used Portuguese charts captured from ships, maps from India, and most tantalizingly, what he described as maps drawn in the time of Columbus, and even older sources that had survived through the ages. If true, this suggests that fragments of a much older, perhaps ancient cartographic tradition had been preserved and were still circulating in the early 16th century. How could such knowledge have survived? This is the enduring question that has made the Piri Reis map an object of fascination. Some historians propose that Piri Reis had access to charts made by earlier Arab, Chinese, or even Viking explorers, whose voyages predated European discovery of the Americas. Others wonder whether his claim to ancient maps hints at a much deeper time depth, a survival of geographic memory from the classical or even pre-classical world. The map's cartographic accuracy is striking. The proportions of Africa, for example, are far closer to their true shape than those found on many European maps of the early 16th century. The relative positions of the Atlantic islands are also rendered with remarkable precision. This has led some researchers to propose that its sources may have been based on measurements made using a knowledge of longitude that should not have been available until much later. Yet the Piri Reis map is fragmentary. Only about 1/3 of the original world chart survives. We do not know what the lost sections contained. Did they show the entire globe? Did they depict other lands unknown to early modern Europe? This absence leaves room for imagination, and with it, controversy. Scholars have debated whether the supposed Antarctic coastline is truly Antarctica at all, or simply a misdrawn representation of South America's southern coast. Some suggest that the resemblance is coincidental, a quirk of the projection used by Piri Reis. Others see in it the tantalizing possibility that someone, long before the modern age, charted parts of the world that we thought were unknown. Beyond the question of Antarctica, the map forces us to consider how knowledge travels across time. Even if we set aside the more radical claims, Piri Reis's testimony demonstrates that geographical information moved through a network of cultures: Arab traders, Mediterranean sailors, African pilots, and European explorers, before being fixed in the maps we know today. What fragments of that knowledge were already ancient by the time Piri Reis laid ink to gazelle skin? What older hands first traced the coastlines that he later copied? The Topkapi fragment remains one of the few surviving witnesses of that transmission. Its surface is crowded with coastlines, compass roses, and even tiny ships sketched in lively colour. It is both a work of science and a work of art, embodying the wonder of a world just being rediscovered, or perhaps rediscovered twice over. For if the sources Piri Reis used were truly ancient, then the age of exploration was less a moment of discovery than a moment of remembering. Today, the Piri Reis map is often invoked in discussions of forbidden history, a symbol of the possibility that humanity's knowledge of the globe may have deeper roots than we think. Most mainstream historians are cautious, preferring to attribute its anomalies to creative guesswork. early Portuguese mapping efforts, and the natural errors of projection, but even they must admit that it is a remarkable survival, a rare artifact that connects the Ottoman court to the wider history of exploration, and perhaps to something far older. Standing before the map in Istanbul today, one sees not just inked coastlines, but a palimpsest of memory, layers of knowledge passed from one civilization to another, edited, updated, and at last, committed to a skin that survived by chance. It is a reminder that maps are never neutral. They are choices about what to remember, what to record, and what to leave blank. As we look at the southern edge of the fragment, with its mysterious sweep of land, we are invited to wonder, was this simply an Ottoman cartographer's best guess? Or was it a glimpse, however imperfect, of a memory carried across millennia, of lands once known, then lost, then found again? The Piri Reis map does not answer. It only points, like a compass rose, toward the possibility that the past may hold more knowledge than we have yet retrieved. Chapter 22. The Mysterious Sea. Peoples, at the twilight of the Late Bronze Age, around the 12th century BCE, the great civilizations that had flourished for centuries began to falter. From Anatolia to the Levant, from the Aegean to the Nile, palaces burned, cities crumbled, and once mighty kingdoms vanished into silence. The world that had been connected by trade routes, diplomacy, and shared knowledge dissolved into chaos. And at the heart of this collapse, ancient records speak of enigmatic invaders who came not by land, but by sea. The Egyptians called them the Sea Peoples. We know of them primarily through inscriptions carved into stone during the reigns of pharaohs Meneptah and Ramesses III. These texts describe waves of foreign warriors, armed with strange weapons, arriving on ships to assault the Nile Delta. On the walls of Medinet Habu, the mortuary temple of Ramesses III, scenes unfold like an ancient chronicle of terror. Lines of ox-drawn carts carrying women and children, ships locked in combat, warriors in feathered headdresses hurling spears. Ramesses boasts of victory, claiming to have driven them into the sea. Yet the very fact that Egypt felt the need to commemorate this struggle suggests how grave the threat truly was. But who were these Sea Peoples? The name itself is a modern construction, drawn from Egyptian references to groups described as coming from the islands. Scholars have long debated their identity. Some argue they were displaced Mycenaeans, fleeing the collapse of their own palatial centers in Greece. Others suggest they were a confederation of many peoples, Aegean migrants, Anatolian rebels, Levantine raiders, bound together by desperation. There are even those who see them less as invaders than as refugees, swept along by famine, drought, or earthquake, searching for new lands to settle. The evidence is fragmentary, scattered like wreckage across the Mediterranean. Inscriptions list names that echo faintly across the centuries: the Shurdan, the Shekelesh, the Peliset, the Denayan, the Cheka. Some of these groups can be tentatively linked to later peoples. The Peliset, for instance, are widely thought to be the Philistines, who appear in the Hebrew Bible as newcomers to the southern Levant. The Denayan may connect to the Danans of Homeric epic, but certainty eludes us. The Sea Peoples remain a mosaic of half-formed identities, a riddle carved in stone. What is clear is the devastation they left in their wake. The Hittite Empire, once a power rivaling Egypt, disappeared almost entirely. Cities along the Levantine coast, Ugarit, Byblos, Ashkelon, were sacked or abandoned. In Greece, the palaces of Mycenae, Pylos, and Tiryns fell into ruin, giving way to centuries of decline later remembered as the Greek Dark Age. Trade networks that had carried tin, copper, ivory, and ideas across vast distances collapsed. Writing systems, once widespread, vanished from everyday use. It was as if an entire world system had cracked and fallen into the sea. The reasons for this collapse remain as contested as the origins of the Sea Peoples themselves. Some historians emphasize climate change. Evidence suggests a prolonged drought may have gripped the eastern Mediterranean in this era, straining agriculture and provoking famine. Others point to seismic activity, earthquakes that may have toppled cities already weakened by scarcity. Still others argue for internal revolt, peasants and vassals turning against the elites of the Bronze Age kingdoms. The Sea Peoples may not have been the cause of collapse, but rather its most visible symptom, the waves of migration and raiding unleashed when the old order disintegrated. And yet, amid the destruction, new cultures emerged. The Philistines established themselves in Canaan, leaving behind distinctive pottery and architecture. In Greece, the memory of the Mycenaean age survived in oral tradition, later crystallizing into the epics of Homer. Egypt, though battered, endured, preserving the memory of its victories in monumental inscriptions. The chaos of the Sea Peoples was also a moment of transformation, the threshold between the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, between the old empires and the new civilizations yet to rise. The mystery of the Sea Peoples lingers because their story is incomplete. We catch glimpses of them in Egyptian carvings, in ruined cities, in scattered artifacts, but never a full account. Were they conquerors or exiles? A unified force? Or a tide of desperate peoples moving across the sea? And to what extent did their arrival shape the birth of the world that followed? The Israelite kingdoms, the Phoenician traders, the Greek city-states. As the Mediterranean sun sets over the ruins of Ugarit and the silent stones of Hattusa, one cannot help but imagine the sails of unknown ships on the horizon. For those who lived through that age, the Sea Peoples were not myth, but reality, the embodiment of uncertainty, the storm at civilization's edge. For us, they remain a riddle, a reminder that history is as fragile as the clay tablets on which it is written. The collapse of the Bronze Age still speaks across 3,000 years, urging us to look closer at how interconnected worlds can fracture, how systems once thought eternal can vanish almost overnight. The Sea Peoples were not merely destroyers, they were also participants in a turning point of history, carrying with them the shadows of one age into the dawn of another. And so their story drifts between fact and legend, their true identity hidden beneath waves of time. Were they the scourge of nations or the wanderers of a broken world? Perhaps both. The stones of Egypt still bear their names, but the sea itself has kept their secrets. Chapter 23. The Copper Scroll of Qumran. Beneath the arid cliffs of the Judean desert, not far from the lifeless waters of the Dead Sea, a shepherd once threw a stone into a cave and heard the unmistakable sound of pottery shattering. That sound would lead to one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yet among the hundreds of parchment and papyrus fragments containing hymns, biblical texts, and community rules, one stood apart like a voice from another world. It was not written on fragile skin or reed paper. It was engraved upon metal, a copper sheet hammered thin, cut into sections, and rolled like a scroll. When scholars first unrolled it in 1956, carefully, for the metal had become brittle over 2,000 years, they found no poetry, no prophecy, no sermons about the righteous or the end of days. Instead, they found a list. Line after line described places, measurements, and above all, treasures. Bars of gold, vessels of silver, caches of coin, each entry suggesting a hidden deposit waiting to be recovered. In total, the scroll claimed that vast quantities of precious metal, some estimate more than 60 tons, had been concealed at 64 locations across the land of Israel. The text is unique among the Qumran corpus. Its language is blunt, practical, even technical, unlike the theological musings of the other scrolls. Where the community rule scroll speaks of purity and ritual, the copper scroll speaks of weights and measures, cubits and amphorae. The choice of copper as a medium only deepens the mystery. Why carve such a document onto metal unless it was meant to endure, to outlast fire, decay, and time itself? Scholars have long debated whether the treasures it describes were real. Some propose that they represented temple offerings from Jerusalem, spirited away in the tense years before the Roman legions breached the city in 70 CE. The Qumran sect, often identified with the Essenes, may have seen themselves as guardians of the temple's sanctity, charged with preserving its wealth from defilement. Others suggest that the scroll's contents were symbolic, an esoteric inventory of spiritual riches or ritual items. Yet the level of detail challenges the idea that it was merely metaphorical. The scroll names specific valleys, cisterns, colonnades, and landmarks, even specifying the depth at which a hoard was buried. This has tempted more than a few treasure hunters over the decades. Teams have scoured the hills near Qumran, metal detectors in hand, searching for any sign of the fabled caches. None have been found. Some sites may have been destroyed, others looted long ago. Still others perhaps lie undisturbed beneath layers of dust and centuries of silence. The copper scroll seems to capture a moment suspended in time, a community aware that catastrophe was coming, recording where they had hidden what they valued most. Whether this treasure was meant for their own return after the danger had passed, or as a trust for future generations, we cannot say, but the act itself feels almost ceremonial, a final gesture of preservation, as though to say, this was ours, and we will not let it be lost. There is also the question of authorship. Was the scroll created by the Qumran sect itself, or did they merely safeguard it? Some researchers argue that the language and content of the scroll suggest priestly authorship, perhaps linked to the temple in Jerusalem. If so, the scroll may be a relic of the priestly class who fled the city during the Jewish revolt, carrying with them not just their theology, but their treasures. The treasure described is almost unimaginably vast. 60 talents of gold here, hundreds of silver vessels there, all scattered across a network of hiding places. Even in the 1st century, this would have represented a fortune beyond reckoning. If it ever existed as described, its recovery would have been one of the greatest windfalls in archaeological history. And yet it remains unfound. The land still holds its secrets. The copper scroll reminds us that history is not only about texts and dates, but about the choices people make in moments of crisis. Someone, 2 millennia ago, believed that this information was worth engraving into metal. Someone believed that what they had hidden would matter to those who came after them. That gesture of trying to speak across centuries, of leaving a map for future hands, is as powerful as any gold hoard could be. Standing today in the arid silence of Qumran, with the desert wind hissing through the cliffs, it is easy to imagine the urgency of that moment. The approaching sound of Roman boots, the hurried digging, the lowering of vessels into pits, the hammering of copper sheets, the patient incision of words into metal, and then the sealing of the cave, the hope, perhaps vain, that the treasure and its record would remain untouched until the world was ready for them again. The scroll was found. The treasure was not. Its entries still wait, like coordinates in a cosmic riddle, daring the modern world to seek them out. Was it all taken long ago? Is it buried still beneath sands that shift each season? Or was it never meant to be dug up at all, but simply to remind us of what was valued in a vanished age? Like so many of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Copper Scroll does not offer resolution. It offers a whisper, a clue, an unfinished story whose ending may still lie hidden somewhere under the stones of the desert. Chapter 24. The Lost Civilization. Beneath the Black Sea. Beneath the dark, still waters of the Black Sea lies a silence deeper than time. Today, ships cross its surface, fishing nets drift along its edges, and coastal cities rise along its shores. But far below, on the seabed where sunlight fades, traces of another world have been found. A world drowned thousands of years ago. Here, marine archaeologists have uncovered the remains of ancient shorelines, submerged settlements, and hints of a human story that may once have played out along coasts, now lost to the sea. The Black Sea was not always as we know it. For much of the last ice age, it was a vast freshwater lake, sealed off from the Mediterranean. Its level lay hundreds of feet lower than today, surrounded by valleys where rivers ran and communities may have thrived. Then, around 7,500 years ago, something changed. Geologists speak of a catastrophic flood, the rising waters of the Mediterranean bursting through the Bosporus Strait, cascading into the lower basin of the Black Sea. A torrent roared in, reshaping landscapes overnight. Valleys became gulfs, plains became seafloor, and if people had built homes along those fertile shores, their world would have vanished beneath the rising tide. This event is known as the Black Sea Deluge hypothesis, first proposed in the 1990s by geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman. Their study suggested that around 5600 BCE, the sea rose suddenly by as much as 150 meters, inundating over 60,000 square miles of land. The numbers are staggering. Imagine whole river valleys swallowed, villages consumed, coastlines pushed back for miles in every direction. If such a flood occurred, it would not have been a gentle advance, but a cataclysm, a moment seared into memory, perhaps later recalled as legend. It is here that science and myth begin to converge. Across the ancient Near East, stories of a great deluge appear again and again. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh preserves the tale of Utnapishtim, who survived a flood sent to destroy humankind. In the Hebrew Bible, Noah builds his ark as waters cover the earth. Even in Greek tradition, Deucalion and Pyrrha ride out a flood that drowns humanity. Could the Black Sea event have been one source of these stories? Some scholars argue that the memory of rising waters may have been passed down, altered and retold, until it became myth. Others remain cautious, pointing out that floods occur in many places, and legends may arise from many different experiences. What is certain is that archaeology has confirmed the presence of human settlements now beneath the waves. In 2000, explorer Robert Ballard, famed for his discovery of the Titanic, led an expedition into the Black Sea. His team located evidence of ancient shorelines more than 100 meters below the current surface. They found remains of wooden structures, worked timbers preserved by the sea's unique chemistry. For beneath the surface, where oxygen cannot penetrate, the Black Sea holds a stillness that preserves what other waters would consume. In these depths, ships centuries old lie intact, and so too the remnants of older worlds endure. Subsequent surveys have uncovered additional signs: stone tools, ceramics, traces of habitation buried beneath sediment. Each discovery deepens the mystery. Were these isolated fishing camps, small communities clinging to a lake's edge? Or do they hint at something greater? A network of settlements that flourished before the flood, erased in an instant and remembered only in myth. The very idea that a civilization could vanish beneath the Black Sea unsettles the way we think about history. We are accustomed to ruins rising above ground, to temples and tombs standing as monuments to the past. But here, the ruins lie beneath waves, hidden from sight, erased from maps until modern technology rediscovers them. How many other coastlines, drowned by rising seas after the Ice Age, might conceal forgotten chapters of our story? The question grows more pressing when we recall that human civilization as we know it arose during a time of great environmental change. Between 12,000 and 6,000 years ago, glaciers melted, seas surged, and coastlines shifted. Communities living on fertile shores would have been displaced again and again, their villages claimed by the tide. The Black Sea may be only one example among many, a reminder that what we call the beginning of history may stand upon the wreckage of older worlds. And yet, the Black Sea offers something unique. Its depths preserve. In recent years, expeditions have revealed shipwrecks from Greek, Roman, and Byzantine eras, so well preserved that ropes, carvings, and even cargo remain visible. If such endurance can preserve ships 2,000 years old, might it also hold remnants far older? Wooden beams, tools, perhaps even dwellings. The possibilities stir both science and imagination. Still, we must be cautious. The evidence is fragmentary, the interpretations debated. Not all scholars accept the catastrophic flood model. Some argue for a slower rise in water level, a gradual inundation rather than a sudden deluge. For them, the Black Sea's transformation was no single event, but a long process, unfolding over centuries, with people adapting and moving as the shoreline crept inward. In this view, the link to flood myths may be more poetic than literal, a resonance rather than a record. And yet, whether sudden or slow, the truth remains. People lived where the sea now lies. They built homes, worked the land, raised families. Their presence lingers in artifacts pulled from the depths, in patterns carved into the drowned shoreline, and then they were gone, their world submerged, their stories left untold. To gaze across the Black Sea today is to look not only at a body of water, but at a veil. Beneath it may lie the ruins of a forgotten chapter of human prehistory. Fragments of cultures swept away by rising waters, sealed in the darkness for 7,000 years. We may never know their names, their gods, their songs, but their silence speaks. It reminds us that our record of the past is incomplete, and that for every civilization we can see, there may be another hidden beneath the waves. And so the Black Sea becomes both a mirror and a mystery, a place where archaeology and myth converge, where flood legends echo against geological data, where timber and pottery whisper of vanished lives. It invites us to imagine not just what was lost, but what might still be waiting, preserved in its depths. The waves lap gently against the shore, hiding their secret well. But somewhere below, in the oxygenless dark, the remnants of an older world endure. Perhaps one day they will rise again into light. Chapter 25. Yonaguni and the Underwater Ruins of Japan. Off the southern coast of Japan, near the subtropical island of Yonaguni, the ocean hides a secret. In the 1980s, local divers exploring the depths beyond the island's coral reefs stumbled upon an extraordinary formation. Massive stone terraces, steps and platforms stretching across the seafloor. At first glance, it seemed impossible. A city submerged, frozen in time beneath the waves. The sheer scale was breathtaking. Enormous flat surfaces aligned in angular patterns, some resembling staircases, others vast platforms, and a formation that many have likened to a stepped pyramid. The Yonaguni site immediately drew the attention of geologists, archaeologists, and enthusiasts alike. But here, clarity is elusive. Some experts argue that these features are entirely natural, the product of tectonic activity, erosion, and fracturing of the local sandstone. The rock tends to break along planar lines, producing flat terraces and sharp angles. To the casual observer, these could appear remarkably regular, almost architectural. Yet other researchers see patterns too precise to be random. Parallel lines extending over hundreds of meters, terraces measuring tens of meters in width, corners that form near-perfect right angles, and what appear to be channels or pathways linking distinct sections. If the formations are indeed artificial, their implications are profound. Conventional history places the emergence of complex civilizations, capable of large-scale construction, well after the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago or later. Yet the Yonaguni structures lie beneath 20 meters of water today, suggesting that they were built when sea levels were lower, perhaps 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. This would place them in a period when, according to mainstream archaeology, humans were largely hunter-gatherers, without the technology or societal organization to erect monuments of such scale. Diving deeper, the formations become even more remarkable. One of the most prominent features, often called the pyramid, rises in stepped layers from the seabed. Each step is carefully leveled, and terraces extend outward, resembling plazas or public spaces. Nearby, large boulders appear to have been shaped into platforms, and some researchers have identified what could be terraces for habitation or ceremonial use. There are also grooves carved into stone, and what look like channels, perhaps for water management, or perhaps for ritual purposes. These features are so massive that fully exploring them requires specialized diving equipment, and many areas remain inaccessible to this day. Proponents of the artificial theory point to additional clues. Some underwater ledges appear to have faces or carved motifs, suggesting intentional shaping. They note that the geometry is consistent across multiple formations, hinting at planning rather than random fracture. The precision of the terraces, the alignment of platforms, and the apparent symmetry of certain structures all raise the question, could an advanced, lost culture have existed here, leaving only stones behind? Now concealed beneath the rising seas, opponents remain cautious. They emphasize that natural processes in the region are exceptionally powerful. The Yonaguni Formation lies on an active tectonic fault, where earthquakes, tsunamis, and strong currents have shaped the landscape for millennia. Sedimentary layers of sandstone can fracture in ways that mimic human construction, creating straight edges and flat surfaces. Even so, the site defies easy classification. It sits at the boundary between geology and archaeology, challenging observers to consider both explanations simultaneously. Adding to the mystery are artifacts found nearby, though none directly on the terraces themselves. Stone tools, pottery shards, and shell middens from the Jomon period have been recovered in the surrounding areas, dating back roughly 5,000 to 10,000 years. While these finds do not prove the terraces were man-made, they do indicate that humans were active along these coasts when sea levels were lower, possibly leaving behind cultural traces that align with the submersion timeline. The Yonaguni ruins also ignite comparisons with other submerged sites around the world. Some draw parallels to the ruins of Dwarka off the coast of India, or to submerged stone platforms in the Mediterranean. Each discovery challenges assumptions about the relationship between sea levels, human settlement, and the capacity for monumental construction in prehistoric times. Yonaguni, however, stands out for the clarity and scale of its features, for the sense of intentionality that some see etched into the rock. For divers, exploring the site is both exhilarating and humbling. The terraces stretch into the blue haze of the ocean, vanishing into darkness, with occasional boulders rising like monoliths from the sand. It is a silent city, untouched by human hands for thousands of years, yet shaped in a way that seems deliberate. One cannot help but feel that, if it were artificial, Its creators intended to leave a lasting legacy, a testament to knowledge and skill that survives even beneath the waves. Yet the questions remain. If this was a constructed city, who built it? What was its purpose? Ceremonial, residential, or something else entirely? And why is there so little evidence of it on land? Perhaps it was a coastal settlement that fell victim to rising seas, a monument to a forgotten people swallowed by the ocean. Or perhaps it is a natural formation that coincidentally evokes human design, a geological illusion that tests the limits of our pattern recognition. The Yonaguni site, whether natural or artificial, forces us to reconsider assumptions about prehistoric humanity. It challenges the timelines that frame our understanding of early civilization and reminds us that the record of human history is incomplete, scattered, and fragile. It is a place where stone speaks in silence, inviting reflection rather than demanding answers. As the divers ascend, leaving the terraces and pyramid behind, sunlight streaming down through the turquoise waters, one cannot escape the sense of awe. Here lies a landscape that bridges human curiosity, geological processes, and the vast unknown of our own past. Yonaguni remains a puzzle, a sunken monument, a geological marvel or both, suspended in time, waiting for new research, fresh eyes, and perhaps a deeper understanding that may never fully arrive. In the end, the underwater terraces off Yonaguni Island remind us of the ocean's power to preserve, to hide, and to provoke wonder. They whisper of a time when the seas were lower, when humans may have walked where waves now crash, and when the traces of a lost civilization, or the artistry of nature itself, could still survive beneath the deep. The mystery lingers, unresolved, and in that silence, it is eternal. Chapter 26, Closing Reflections. The endless horizon of the past across deserts. Beneath seas, within silent ruins, the traces of humanity's earliest civilizations endure, whispering their stories across the millennia. 4 hours have taken us through the monuments of Egypt, the city-states of Sumer, the submerged villages of lost coasts, and the enigmatic pillars of sites like Göbekli Tepe. Yet, for every wall we have traced, every tablet we have read, and every stone we have imagined, there remain vast expanses of the past, still shrouded in shadow. The horizon of history stretches farther than any eye can see, and we have glimpsed only its closest edges. The pyramids, ziggurats, and step tombs we explored were not simply stone and mortar. They were expressions of human aspiration, of kings, priests, and communities striving to touch the eternal. They tell of ambition and ingenuity, yet they also speak of questions left unanswered. Who first carved the Sphinx? What ceremonies once echoed beneath the subterranean chambers of Saqqara? Which stories of flood, conquest, and creation were recorded, and which were lost to fire, water, and time? Every artifact preserves only a fragment of a world that has long since vanished, and each discovery raises new enigmas rather than providing closure. Even in sites long studied, the silence of the past hums with the unknown. Beneath the Black Sea, drowned settlements hint at forgotten cultures. The Library of Ashurbanipal preserves thousands of tablets, yet how many scrolls, papyri, and oral traditions were never committed to clay? The Sea Peoples, whose names survive carved into Egyptian walls, remain a riddle, their origins and intentions obscured by millennia. History is as much defined by absence as presence. What is missing is as instructive as what endures. In contemplating these lost chapters, one begins to sense a rhythm that is both humbling and exhilarating. Civilizations rise, flourish, and vanish, leaving behind traces that tease the imagination. Every carved symbol, every architectural flourish, every fragment of writing is a thread reaching across time, connecting us to people whose lives were as complex, as fragile, and as beautiful as our own. Yet for all that survives, the record is incomplete. There are gaps, spaces in which entire societies may have thrived, cultures whose memory is erased by shifting rivers, fires, or the rising sea. Our journey has also revealed the ingenuity of early humans. The Sumerians built bridges and canals to sustain their cities in a challenging landscape. The Egyptians conceived structures of unprecedented scale and precision, designed to endure beyond lifetimes. At Göbekli Tepe, hunter-gatherers crafted massive T-shaped pillars revealing a capacity for organization, ritual, and symbolic thought long before agriculture had taken root. These accomplishments challenge our assumptions about the linear progression of civilization, reminding us that human creativity often leaps across what we presume are the boundaries of possibility. Yet, it is the unknown that calls most insistently. Each site is a question as much as an answer. The submerged villages of the Black Sea hint at histories erased by rising waters. The labyrinths of Hawara whisper of archives that may still lie buried. The tombs, pyramids, and temples conceal chambers, passages, and inscriptions yet to be fully revealed. We are always confronted with partial narratives, fragments that tantalize the mind and ignite curiosity, urging us to probe deeper into the silence of the past. In this way, history becomes not a completed story but a journey. Every excavation, every translation, every remote sensing survey uncovers pieces of the puzzle, yet the puzzle remains incomplete. Perhaps that is the enduring fascination of the ancient world. It is a landscape of mysteries, where certainty is rare and wonder is abundant. To walk in the shadow of a ziggurat or gaze across the Giza plateau is to confront the vastness of human ambition and the limits of our knowledge simultaneously. We are reminded, too, of the fragility of memory. Time erodes stone and paper alike. Civilizations that lasted centuries can disappear in decades. Floods, earthquakes, fires, and human conflict have claimed countless artifacts and records. What survives is contingent, preserved by chance as much as design. And yet, even in absence, the silence resonates, a presence in itself, inviting reflection, imagination, and reverence. The past is an endless horizon. Each discovery opens the door to further questions. What civilizations lie beneath layers of sediment or under the waves, waiting for eyes capable of seeing them? What knowledge was lost, leaving only echoes in myths, legends, and fragmentary inscriptions? And what patterns, long hidden, might we discern if we could fully piece together the mosaics of human history? These are not questions that demand immediate answers. They are invitations to linger, to consider the depth and breadth of human experience. As we close this chapter, we are left with a profound sense of both humility and awe. The civilizations of Egypt, Sumer, and the forgotten societies of prehistory are monuments not just to what humanity achieved, but to the enduring mystery of existence itself. For all we have uncovered, the ocean of time remains largely unmapped, its depths filled with stories waiting to be rediscovered, with voices that may never speak again, and with questions that only the passage of centuries can illuminate. History, then, is never complete. It is a horizon we approach but never fully reach, a journey in which the search itself is as vital as the answers it may bring. To study the ruins, to read the tablets, to walk the desert sands is to participate in that journey, to honor the ingenuity of those who came before, and to acknowledge the profound gaps in our understanding. In every corner of the ancient world, in every buried city and shattered temple, we find the same lesson. The past is vast, fragile, and eternal, and it calls us to keep seeking, to keep asking, and to keep imagining. And so we leave these ancient worlds not with closure, but with wonder. The pyramids, ziggurats, labyrinths, submerged settlements, and forgotten archives are more than monuments. They are invitations. They urge us to look beyond what is seen, to listen to what is silent, and to accept that history is not merely what has been recorded, but also what has been lost, concealed, or forgotten. The journey continues, as endless as the horizon itself, and the mysteries of the past remain, waiting for those who are willing to seek them.